annual town meeting, testing one.
Moderator, welcome to night 3 of Milton's 2021 annual town meeting. Having been advised by the town clerk that we have achieved quorum, I declare the meeting open for business. Per our motion to consider to a date and time certain on Tuesday, we're now going to proceed to Article 38, which you should be able to find on page 68 of your warrant. Okay, so recommended that the town vote to authorize the select board to acquire by purchase, eminent domain, or otherwise a portion of the property located at 432 Adams Street, Milton, Mass. Milton Assessor's Record Parcel ID G495, owned now or formerly by the Roman Catholic Archbishop of Boston, shown on a plan entitled Proposed Lot CA01 dated March 23rd, 2021, prepared by Bowler, 45 Franklin Street, 5th floor, Boston, Mass. 02110. A copy of which is on file in the Milton office, town office building at the town engineer's office, bounded and described as follows: beginning at the northerly west corner of Libby Road at Stone, bound by CBLBTFD as shown on said plan, thence 84.1 feet following course north 88, 52 degrees, 52 minutes, 33 seconds east, 8408 feet, thence 57.2 feet following course southwest 11 hours, 50 degrees, 59 minutes, pardon me, east 57.24 feet, thence 10 feet along line following course north 88. This is really a test for your town moderators. Remember his Boy Scout Latin lunge. North 88 degrees, 43 minutes, 41 seconds, east 10 feet, thence 55.1 feet following course south 11 hours, 59 minutes, then east 55.06 feet, then 130.7 feet along line following course south 28 degrees, 20 minutes, 31 seconds west, 130.72 feet, Adams Street, thence 92.4 feet along following course north 56 degrees, 54 minutes, 37 seconds west, 92.41 feet, the intersection point of Adams Street and Libby Road, thence 180.6 feet along the line course north 13 degrees, 49 hours, 33 minutes east, 180.23 feet to the beginning, containing 21,052 square feet, more or less, substantially in accordance with the terms of a purchase and sale agreement between the town and the Roman Catholic Archbishop of Boston, and to authorize the select board to grant and accept all easements necessary to develop said portion of the property, and to take all other necessary actions necessary to complete this acquisition, and that the town appropriate to an amount not to exceed $890,000 to pay the costs of this acquisition, including the payment of all costs incidental and related thereto. To meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the select board, is authorized to borrow an amount pursuant to GLC 4471 or pursuant to any other enabling authority, and to issue bonds or notes of the town therefore, and that the select board is authorized to accept grants or gifts from any other public or private funding source relating to this appropriation. Any premium received upon the sale of any bonds or notes approved by this vote, less any such premium applied to the payment of the cost or issuance of such bonds or notes, may be applied to the payment of costs approved by this vote in accordance with General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 20, thereby reducing the amount authorized to be borrowed to pay such cost by a like amount. What I would like to do is, this has been submitted by the select board. It'll require a 2/3 vote. I'd like to first recognize Melinda Collins, the chair of the select board. Ms. Collins, you're recognized. Ms. Collins, are you there?
Mr. Moderator,
There you are.
Melinda Collins, Select Board Chair, Town Meeting Member, thank you, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 9. At the February 22nd, 2021 town meeting, an article authorizing the Select Board to enter into a long-term lease agreement with the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Boston for a half-acre parcel located at 432 Adams Street, what we know as St. Agatha's Parish, came before town meeting, but was not considered because the board was still in negotiations. Now we come before you seeking an authorization to purchase that half acre. The parcel is intended as the site of a new East Milton fire station, one of the 3 projects that was approved at that town meeting in February by an 87% vote of town meeting. During the course of negotiations, both parties agreed, that is the Select Board and the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Boston, both parties agreed that a sale was preferred, and this is the article before town meeting today. The board seeks authorization to enter into a purchase and sale agreement for this half acre located at 432 Adams. In doing our due diligence, the Select Board contracted with Emmett Logue of Landvest for valuation services and Johanna Schneider and Steve Mangold of Hemingway and Barnes as special counsel for the transaction. Mr. Zulus and Mr. Wells of the board acted on behalf of the board during negotiations, guided by Mr. Logue's valuation analysis. The purchase price of $890,000 falls within the range of Mr. Logue's analysis, which you'll hear more detail about shortly. The board also held a forum regarding neighborhood concerns with the Fire Station Building Committee, the architect, and Chief Madden. And the chief also had a separate on-site or almost on-site meeting because they couldn't meet right on the property, but a meeting with the neighborhood. I also attended the first design charrette hosted by the Fire Station Building Committee that is held for, well, everyone in Milton, but neighbors are, of course, most interested in this at this time. There will be a second one held once the architect has refined the designs based upon the feedback. Mr. Clark, who will be joining us a little later, can also speak more to the design process if requested. The board is grateful to the parish of St. Agatha and the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Boston, and is especially appreciative for their willingness to reconsider the offer to purchase the land for the new East Milton Fire Station. So we look forward to being good neighbors for years to come if this article is approved. And in addition, the board would like to thank the Fire Station Building Committee, especially Dan Clark and Chair Brian Walsh, and also former Fire Chiefs Malcolm Larson and Jack Grant for their work to pass the April 27th ballot question, and especially the voters, because voters are instrumental in moving much needed capital projects forward. These new stations will ensure the health and safety of our firefighters, which is as important as the safety they bring to our residents, our staff, our workers, and our visitors every day, 24 hours a day. And now I'd like to introduce Brian Walsh, who's the chairman of the Fire Station Building Committee, and Dan Clark, vice chair of the Fire Station Building Committee, to speak about the parcel location and some other items.
Mr. Walsh, Mr. Clark, you're both recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is Brian Walsh, Chair of the Fire Station Building Committee. And I know that Dan Clark is with me and able to share some slides. So Lynn, I think you probably had that worked out with him. Mr. Moderator, you can't hear me, is that correct?
Loud and clear.
Thank you. So thank you all, town meeting members. On behalf of the 11 members of the Fire Station Building Committee, I have the privilege to share some of our thoughts and hard work for the past several years. I think the most pertinent question is, how did the Fire Station Building Committee end up with the St. Agatha's site location? Well, we realized it was important first to determine if we needed 3 stations or if we could appropriately provide coverage to the town from 2 locations. So we hired a third-party firm to complete a runtime analysis to assist us. NFPA 1710, standard for the organization and deployment of fire suppression operations, emergency medical operations, and special operations to the public by carrier fire departments, calls for a runtime of no more than 4 minutes for the first engine and 4 responders, and the second engine to be at your site within 8 minutes, or for 90% of the incidents. So it's a strict guideline you have to look at. The analysis was conducted utilizing a geographic information system, GIS technology. The GIS model included traffic data, topography churn delays, traffic lights and stoplights, and speed limits. Additionally, the call location and type for all verifiable town department incidents from the previous 5 fiscal years, 1st of July 2012 through June 30th, 2017, were incorporated into the GIS model. The GIS analysis results were then converted into graphics to illustrate the runtime from each location in various forms. Based on the review of the study completed by FireStats LLC and EF Geographic Inc., the committee concluded the following. A 2-station scenario is not a viable option for the town, given the inherent impact it would have on life safety to the residents and firefighters. So relocating the current 525 Adams Street station to the west as far as, but not further than 400 Edge Hill Road, we found out through this analysis would have a negligible change on the 4-minute run times in the call volume distribution compared to the existing condition for the 3 stations. So we knew that both the fire headquarters station and Atherton Street had sufficient land mass around their actual stations so that a renovation or new build on site could work. We were concerned that the current East Milton site was too small to work with, as determined by the Fire Study Committee that had been finished just previous to our being formed. However, we felt we needed to take the time and look seriously at whether we could do something to make that site work. The FSBC reviewed various scenarios for the existing East Milton station, including renovation, addition, and new construction in conjunction with or without adjacent land acquisition, and determined that the site is too restrictive to meet the size requirements for a 21st century fire station. We prepared, presented, and saved our analysis in a full report, which is available on our website. And we had a former member, John King, had led that effort, and it's a pretty conclusive report. You can see reference to it on the screen now. So we then begin to look to identify locations within the East Milton Fire District that might work. We met with the Cunningham Foundation to see if we could purchase a half-acre parcel from them on Edge Hill Road. They determined it would be outside the scope of the original foundation mission and requirements. We looked at the current East Milton deck, state-owned land adjacent to I-93. We looked at the current East Milton deck, also state-owned land adjacent to I-93 exit 10 on West Squantum Street, town-owned land adjacent to the Cunningham Collicott School, land adjacent to I-93 next to the Park, Ride, and MD, Mass Department of Transportation lot, town-owned land near Adams and Brook Road, and others. They all failed for various reasons. We have really good documentation on our site with that, and you can see a sort of rough chart here. We then solicited private landowners through an RFP for land acquisition to see if anyone within the East Milton Fire District had a land that they would sell to the town. We got a few responses that ended up not being suitable for the East Milton station due to the location within the district, the size, or other factors. In all, we considered approximately 15 locations until St. Agatha's responded to the RFP. It was worth the work and worth the wait. It is a terrific location. It is a mostly flat parcel. It's accessible to major thoroughfares of the East Milton Fire District. It has clear visibility of and from oncoming traffic. It is centrally located within the fire district. You can see that on the screen, that green dot on the right map there. 70 to 75% of all the call volume for that fire district is west of 93, and being west of 93 for that station is very advantageous. Currently takes a minute or more time to get from the current fire station to the East Milton Post Office, which is a very short distance and valuable time lost. At this new site, the fire truck can turn right to get to approximately one half of the district on the Milton side of the expressway, and can turn right on Adams and right on West Squantum Street to reach quickly and safely the 25% of the district that's on the Quincy side of the expressway. There are many other points we could make. I don't want to abuse town meeting members' time. I would move to say that the parcel of land that we're talking about is located within a mixed-use area with a church, school, commercial buildings, and residential. A fire station is an appropriate civic addition within this location, and this fire station is really like a 3-bedroom home with a large commercial garage. And with that, I'll turn back to Madam Chair, Linda Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Ms. Collins, would you like me to recognize Mr. Logue? Would you like a brief introduction before you do?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I would like to introduce Mr. Logue, if that's all right.
Please.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Walsh and Mr. Clark. As I mentioned during my initial comments about process, the board contracted with Emmett T. Logue for valuation services. Mr. Logue is a senior appraiser and advisor at Landvest and joined the firm in October 2020. Mr. Logue previously managed the Hunneman Appraisal Group from 1978 to 2018 and was president of Hunneman Appraisal and Consulting for most of that time period. He served as executive director of Integra Boston in 2019-2020, and Mr. Logue has been a professional appraiser since 1970, and he is a member of the Appraisal Institute, senior residential appraiser, and a counselor of real estate. All very important designations, especially for the work that he was able to do for us. Mr. Logue's experience includes a wide range of residential, commercial, industrial, and special purpose and vacant land assignments throughout Massachusetts, Cape Cod, Nantucket, and southern New Hampshire. He's completed fee appraisal, real estate counseling, review appraisal, marketability, and highest and best use assignments for acquisition, disposition, eminent domain, city planning, assessment, equalization, corporate decision-making, probate, estate planning, mortgage financing, and reuse purposes. He's qualified as an expert witness in Superior Court in Eastern and Central Mass counties, as well as the Massachusetts District of and Probate Courts, and the Massachusetts Appellate Tax Board, Federal Bankruptcy Court, and Massachusetts Land Court. He's participated in arbitration panels and other alternate disputes resolution matters, and he's a graduate of Boston College with a Bachelor's of Science degree in finance. He holds a certified general real estate appraiser license in Massachusetts and in New Hampshire, and has completed numerous appraisal and real estate valuation courses and seminars, and has completed the continuing education program for designated members of the Appraisal Institute. He really has been such a terrific help to us. We really appreciate his counsel and advice, because it allowed the board to negotiate with confidence and in good faith with the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Boston. Welcome, Mr. Logue.
By the way, ladies and gentlemen, Chair Collins contacted me a few weeks ago and introduced Mr. Logue. And since he is an expert, can provide expert testimony that's unique, I thought it was beneficial to have him speak to you tonight on this article. So Mr. Logue, you're recognized.
Thank you very much. Good evening. I was, as Melinda indicated, I was retained by the board in a role of estimating the value of the site or the approximate value of the site. If the Archdiocese decided to put the site up for sale and offer it for sale on the open market. My role did not include anything relating to how much it was worth for a fire station or to the town, other than that the town, if they, in the course of buying the property, theoretically, they would be competing with any other buyers of the property. So what we have here is a 21,452 square foot site that's slightly less than 1/2 acre. That's based on the Bowler plan that was BOHLER that was prepared fairly recently. The property has about 92.4 feet of frontage on Adams Street and 180 feet on Libby Road. Adams Street is a public road, Libby Road is a private street. This represents basically the westerly portion of the site where the St. Agatha's Church Rectory sits. That whole property, that whole parcel is about 1.07 acres. So this is the westerly part of it to the west of the rectory, between the rectory and Libby Road. One of the first things that I did a number of things actually. I analyzed this neighborhood, the surrounding East Milton Square area in the vicinity of the church, which, as you know, is a built-up single-family residential neighborhood, has been for many years. There are very few potential home sites that are available for sale. I'll get into the discussion of the sales that I found, but there aren't many sales in East Milton. They tend to be infill lots and not subdivisions. This property is zoned Residence C, which some of the key requirements are a minimum lot area of 7,500 square feet and a minimum lot frontage of 75 feet. And that would apply whether it's on Adams Street or Libby Road. What's really important here is in analyzing the highest and best use of this property is that there's a provision in the zoning that I spoke to the director of planning about. It's very important, very unusual, but it's very important. And this needs Board of Appeals approval, but if you have a site that contains more than 15,000 square feet of land area, and you can subdivide 2 lots containing 7,500 square feet, or at least 7,500, and at least 75 feet of frontage, and you still have land left over that would allow you to include a lot of at least 60 or 6,000 square feet and at least 60 feet of frontage, then you have the potential for obtaining 3 lots out of this site, not just 2. It's the 2 lots would be allowed essentially by right. If this site was subdivided, it would be what is called an approval not required subdivision, known as ANR, that doesn't get involved with subdivision control regulations. It really ends up receiving a stamp of approval from it's either the planning board or the Board of Appeals, but it has to go through that process, but it's basically an allowed by right process. In the case of adding a 3rd lot, that would require Board of Appeals approval. Now, the land is, as you can see, is a little bit irregularly shaped, but there's still plenty of room to configure 2 lots and also, I believe, looking at the frontages and so forth, putting in 3 lots on the site. And what's also important here is that I'm sure you are all aware, the residential market has been very strong in Eastern Massachusetts and the suburban areas primarily for quite a while, but particularly since the COVID-19 period got underway at the beginning of 2020 or in that time period. And values have gone up, inventories have gone down of not only single family residences, but also buildable house lots. And this is throughout the suburban area and all of the locations that I have worked in the past year. outside of Boston that are where I was involved in a residential assignment. In every case, the values have increased significantly. So what that also means is the demand for this site would be substantial. And I think the primary interest from buyers would be probably be builders. Builders need product to carry on their activities of building houses. And when there's limited land available, and it's not just Milton, it could be Canton or Randolph, Quincy, and other locations. When there's limited land and you're looking at a site that is a single family zoned property in a largely single family residential area of East Milton, this is the type of property that generates a substantial amount of interest, typically, if it's offered for sale on the open market. It's a flat site. It's served by all utilities. It has these provisions in zoning where there's no question that you could obtain 2 lots out of this. And I think a buyer of this property, particularly a builder or perhaps even a land developer, would put this property under agreement contingent on obtaining that extra lot. And I think there's a reasonable probability that that would happen. I can't speak for the Milton Board of Appeals, certainly, but based on what I see in the zoning and the provisions for it, if you satisfy that, then that would have a significant impact on whether or not you can get the 3rd lot. So in the course of doing this analysis, and particularly my highest and best use analysis, I looked at both 2-lot and 3-lot development scenarios, just to see what the range would be, knowing that the 2-lot was very conservative, is essentially in the analysis, it's almost like a placeholder, because 2 lots would be an approval not required, easy approval to obtain most likely, and you'd have 2 lots of about 11,000 square feet. There would be in very strong demand in the market area. If you split it into 3 lots, the average size is about 7,300 square feet, which is obviously smaller, but in and around that neighborhood, on the other side of Adams Street, Governor's Road, Rose Street, then over on to the other side of Squantum Street, St. Agatha's Avenue. Most of those lots are in the 5,000 to 8,000 square foot range. There are a few outliers that may be 10 or 12,000 feet, but most of them are between 5 and 8. That obviously goes back to, when they were built, and a lot of them in the 20s and 30s, in the 40s. But the zoning sort of reflects that. This is a high density, modestly priced part of Milton, but it's still Milton, and it's an appealing part of the town from that standpoint. And so creating lots that are about in the range of averaging 7,300 feet is going to be well within the range of the lot sizes that exist in a built-up single-family area. These are the types of things that I consider, in most of us in the appraisal business that work on residential assignments. One of the things we consider is what kind of a neighborhood are you looking at developing the subdivision? In many cases, zoning has changed to much larger lots than the lots that originally existed. In Milton, that's not the case. In the case of Residence C, there are plenty of other areas of Milton that are lower density, that are acre zoning, for example. In East Milton, the zoning matches basically the existing density, which is where you have the 7,500 square foot minimum, and you even have as low as 6,000 feet if you have other requirements that are met. So I determined from that it was entirely appropriate and prudent to look at this site as a 3-lot as much as a potential 2-lot. And my role here is estimating the highest and best use, which means estimating, in this case, a range of value, but also a value that represents the highest price that would be paid for the property. And that, again, is what usually happens, especially in a strong market. It's what usually happens when properties are put on the market and they're desirable in many different respects. They draw a significant amount of attention, and they tend to sell at higher prices, certainly than they would have a year ago. And there are many instances in this market area where properties sell at higher than asking price. So the site hypothetically here is being put on the market by the Archdiocese in the middle of a very strong residential market that is continuing to improve. So that's sort of a backdrop of analyzing the sales data that I used and then applying the technique, the subdivision development analysis to arrive at a value for the property in as-is condition. The first step, I've got two exhibits that were attached to a memo I prepared. One of them is the subdivision analysis, which shows the math and the calculations, starting with lot value all the way through development costs to the value as is. The other one is a list of the lot sales that I was able to obtain.
Mr. Logan, we can display those documents. Which documents would you like us to display right now?
There are two documents. One is called house lot sales.
You'd like that first?
Yes, please.
Okay, coming up.
We just do one at a time, that's fine.
Yep, we will.
This list of sales you see here is what I was able to obtain is the most recent arm's length sales of similar types of lots in Milton, and I carried the search into Canton, which is, in my view, the next most comparable community to Milton in the immediate area. You'll see that there are, the first two sales are up on Rose Street, which is, I'm sure you're aware, is just beyond Cunningham Park off of Pleasant Street. In all cases, incidentally, I verified these sales with the broker that was involved in selling the lots, just to make sure I wasn't overlooking something significant. At any rate, you see the first two sales is 7,500-foot lots in the same zoning district that sold for $435,000 2 years or more ago. Those lots would be more valuable today. Exactly how much, I'm not sure, but they were developed with colonials after the sale, and those were legitimate arm's length sales, and it gives you an indication of how valuable a house lot is. The other part of this that's important is variations in land areas. The unit of comparison with valuing lots is almost always price per lot. That's where the value is. That's where the utility of the site is. In some cases in inner city, you may see price per square foot, but out in the suburbs, it's going to be price per lot. So that's how this is analyzed. Sale 3 is a much larger site further out Canton Avenue, out in that area that sold as part of a larger estate, actually, with two separate sales at the same time. The $559,000 is perfectly understandable given the size of the lot. It's really good location in that part of Milton. And that was in the middle of 18. That's almost 3 years ago. And then the last three sales, which are actually listed as sale 4, but they're three separate transactions in a developing cul-de-sac subdivision in Canton. This is off Washington Street. It's in town Canton. It's a modestly priced area. It's not the best part of Canton. And these are more recent. These are in 2020, between April and October. They're about 15,000 feet each, and they're around $425 each. The one that sold for $416.5 had a substantial amount of ledge that they had to blast, and as a result, that price was lower. But these lots sold last year for $425. In my view, in talking with other people, Canton is not as desirable. This part of Canton is not as desirable as East Milton. So the $425 is basically the low end of the range, I think, for buildable house lots in the East Milton area, including on the site next to the rectory. So based on that, I concluded that if you looked at two lots, and this, if you want to put up the hypothetical subdivision analysis, which is the second exhibit.
We're pulling that up. The title is hypothetical lot analysis.
Hypothetical subdivision analysis, or maybe subdivision development method.
Is this the one?
There you go. Thank you. Okay, so based on the analysis of lot sales and looking at this as a potential 2-lot and 3-lot development, I estimated that if it was just 2 lots, it would average about 11,000 feet each, that a realistic current retail value of each of the house lots would be $450,000, which is a total of $900,000. And that's shows in the total sales revenue line in the middle of that exhibit. On the other hand, if you look at it as a potential 3-lot development, which is scenario B, the second column, I concluded that the lot values would be $425,000 each on a retail basis, the current market value. Again, that's the same price that they've paid in Canton fairly recently, although the 7,300 square foot average is a little bit smaller than Canton. That's a year ago. And also Canton, and that part of Canton, I don't think is desirable as East Milton. So that's $425,000. And the gross sales revenue from those 3 lots is $1,275,000, which is again the line in the middle of the page. Now, the next step is a person buying this, including a builder, is not going to buy the project or buy the site for nothing. He's going to have to do some work to create these 2 or 3 lots. And there is one section there I noted as development costs. There are survey and subdivision costs. There are entrepreneurial incentive, which is basically paying himself profit for his management time involved in the project, and then small amount for transaction costs and carrying costs during the development. Based on some work we've done fairly recently on subdivisions, approval not required subdivisions, we concluded that an average or a realistic engineering cost, which is surveying the lot, splitting it away from the rectory, subdividing it into the 2 or 3 lots, and any other engineering that needs to be done on the site, which is dealing with the proximity to the wetlands riverfront area on the other side of Adams Street. All of that gets put into the engineering cost. That's at $7,000 per lot. These are costs that the buyer of the property would incur in order to get to the point where he could sell the lots for $450,000 or $425,000. The entrepreneurial incentive is, as I said, is related to the management supervision and profit that a developer is going to be looking to obtain as a result of taking on a development like this. In this case, with the 2-lot, we have an as-of-right 2-lot development that would be approved or stamped approval not required. There would still be a certain amount of time and effort that goes into creating this subdivision. And I estimated, again, through experience in working in these kinds of things, that 10% would be a realistic deduction for the entrepreneurial incentive. It's also very much related to risk. The risk of a 2-lot approval not required subdivision on the site is quite low in my view. On the other hand, when you look at scenario B, the risk goes up considerably. And this goes into the discussion I had about the buyer would most likely purchase this property contingent on getting approvals for 3 lots. And assuming he could get the approvals, in this scenario here, he would pay $915,000. The 20% picks up more time and effort on the part of the developer and considerably more risk. So a lot of the risk relating to go from 2 to 3 lots is built into the entrepreneurial incentive. I could have applied a discount rate at the end of the development, but small projects like this, it's usually more appropriate to deduct the profit as one of the costs of the project. So the 20% includes considerably more risk, and that is related to not so much getting the approval of the 7,500 and 6,000 foot lots, but things relating to the proximity of the wetlands, the area of the site, southwest corner that would have some jurisdiction from the Conservation Commission. All of that would have to be dealt with. That's part of the risk. It's also part of the engineering, but it's primarily the risk. And that's built into the entrepreneurial profit. And then the final one is the transaction and carrying costs relating to closing, legal fees, recording sales, and that type of thing. That's a fairly small amount of $3,000 per lot. So those are the units that I apply to then estimate the development costs at the bottom of this exhibit. The survey and subdivision, you can see, is based on either 2 or 3 lots at 14,000 and 21,000. And the entrepreneurial incentive, same thing. It's based on 10% or 20%. And again, it's based on percentage of the sales revenue. The transaction costs, as I said, were $3,000 per lot. And then the last cost item here, which is not insignificant, is the driveway that currently is an egress from the rectory site. It's a diagonal driveway that comes out onto the corner, really onto Adams, but right at the corner of Libby Road. The driveway would have to be relocated. And that is attributed to as a buyer's cost. That's something a purchaser of this property would expect to have to incur, not the Archdiocese. They're not going to relocate the driveway. They're just going to sell it as is and then let the buyer incur all of these costs.
Mr. Logue, if I could interrupt for a minute, we've had a point of order raised by Mr. Chinman about time limits, because we typically try to keep things to 10 minutes. I know Mr. Logue is a guest and unfamiliar with our practices. Mr. Logue, if you're fairly close to wrapping up, that would be helpful.
I'm sorry, I thought about that, but I didn't hear anything. So, all right. So the driveway location is based on a cost estimate from the Fire Station Study Committee. All of the development costs are deducted and indicated value as is. One is 715,000, one is 915,000. As I said a few minutes ago, the 715 or scenario A is strictly a placeholder because it's based on a very conservative approach. A very conservative approach to buying this property is going to result in that person not being able to buy the property because the price is too low. It'll be much closer to 915. And I think something in the mid to high 800s, such as the town is negotiating, is totally appropriate and supported by the market. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Logue, for your analysis. With that, a few points. We have, pardon me? Oh, pardon me. Let me get my camera on. I think you know that according to our bylaws, citizens are allowed to request time to address town meeting as long as they are confirmed by the town clerk as registered voters. We do have one citizen with us here tonight, but I think I'll start with a few members, and then we'll recognize Ms. Kathleen Powers. So the member had her hand up first. The first I see is Ms. Carrie. Is it Leno? You're recognized, ma'am? Nope, I think you dropped your hand. Okay, then we'll go Dr. Christensen, you're recognized.
Cindy Christensen. Sorry. Cindy Christensen, town meeting member, precinct 7. I have 4 questions. I don't believe they'll take much time. One question is, when were the FEMA maps last updated for this location? And also, has the zone area just on the other side of Libby Street, has that increased in width over the, say, last 10 years? That's question number one. Number two is, does St. Agatha plan to sell this lot if Milton doesn't purchase it now? Question three, I'm wondering why we're purchasing now, given that the East Milton station is last on the list for a build. And fourth question, what are the plans for the current East Milton station property?
Thank you. Any other comments or just those questions, Dr. Christian?
Well, I've received a petition from residents in my precinct asking me to vote no on this. And some of their concerns I'm asking about now.
Okay, why don't we get those answers for you, and you can come back if you have follow-up. How's that?
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I'll go to, I think Mr. Walsh, are you able to address these questions? Or Selectman Collins, are you able to address these questions? I see your hand. Yes, Selectman Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I can address some of them. So the National Flood Zone maps along Unquity Brook were updated in October 2020. And actually, it's resulted, there's actually a comment period going on because some of the floodplain areas have changed. The property's not in floodplain A, it's in X, so it's very minimal. But so that I can answer. Has it increased within width in the last 10 years? I can't answer that. Oh, it hasn't? Okay, thank you. Our town administrator has let us know. So if the
So
St.
that was a no, ma'am?
That was a no. Thank you,
you.
sir. Yes. So if the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Boston, if we don't purchase the land, I can't speak for the Archdiocese. I don't think that we can do that. One would have to inquire with them. Why now? I think perhaps Mr. Walsh is probably has more eloquent reasons, but in order to design the station, which takes some time, you do need a location, and it's my understanding that that's one of the reasons that it's so important to do at this time, because we'll need to get the station built before we can move that fire company over. But I think we should go to Mr. Walsh.
Do you know the answer to what happened to East Milton Station?
Yes. So the board has not yet made that property available as surplus. So there is no plan other than to allow it needs to be used for a fire station at this time. And I think there would be considerable community process around that. That's really important to me anyway, in any planning exercise. So, so I hope, so as I said, Mr. Walsh may be able to explain with more eloquence about why now.
Mr. Walsh, can you answer that question for us?
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Moderator. Brian Walsh, Chair of the Fire Station Building Committee and Town Meeting Member from Precinct 8. I'd like to answer part of it and then also introduce our Vice Chair with your permission, Mr. Moderator, because he maybe put some more meat on the bones. In terms of what would the St. Agatha's or the Archdiocese do with the property if we don't purchase it, they responded to RFP, our request, to looking for a parcel of land. So, you know, if that request wasn't out there, I don't think they would have been in the market of just generally selling it. But now that they have, as Chair Melinda Collins mentioned, you know, who knows? In terms of why now, and that's a great question. Thank you, Mrs. Christensen. It is important for us to do it now. It's for a number of reasons. First and foremost, we have not put out these fire station construction out to bid. We have received a lot of advice from experts, both our OPM and our architect, that is very advantageous for the town of Milton to put all three projects out at once. And then depending on the response, who the contractor is, the size of the contractor, their ability to do one building at a time or more, and how it would fit in with our ability to pay, they would respond appropriately. But clearly, knowing that they have three projects that they're able to just start on and bring to completion, will get a much better price. That coupled with the fact that, you know, where the pandemic is coming to an end, interest rates are still low, but there's a strong sense that general prices and certainly construction prices, I think people know, are rising. So we think it's extremely important to build all three. The timeline that we have is for constructing. We did have East Milton last because as we worked on this, we didn't necessarily have a piece of land nailed down. We're attempting to do that tonight, but we knew that we would save the town a substantial amount of money by putting it together as one package now and getting a contractor's commitment to go forward. So with that, I'd like to start with your permission, Mr. Moderator. Mr. Dan Clark, I'm sure can address some of that even a little more fully.
Well, actually, what I might do is, if Dr. Christensen is satisfied with those answers.
Okay.
Any follow-up, Dr. Christensen, or you? Okay.
Yeah, I do have one piece of follow-up, not quite related, but I just looked up that the Milton tax assessors have that entire 1.07 acres valued at $846,400. Now, I understand that that's not the same, that's not determined by the same process that our visitor, who's an expert in this area, comes up with, but that's about the same value as what we're being asked to vote on. So can someone explain the differences? And understanding that tax assessor values are not necessarily actual property values. And that will finish my questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Chair Collins, do we have any members of the Board of Assessors on the line? Let's look at our panelists.
Excuse me,
Yes, go
Mr.
ahead, ma'am.
Moderator.
Yep.
I believe Mr. Logue could probably answer this question for us. And while we're looking to locate perhaps Bob Bushway or somebody from the Board of Assessors, if you like.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Logue, you still there? Can you answer?
Sure. My only comment would be I also can't speak for the assessors. However, I used to be an assessor in Hingham, and I've talked to assessors for many, many years on exempt property. Assessors normally do not value the property as if it was a property that was emblematic of what's happening in the marketplace. We have plenty of properties that sell that are single family or retail or office buildings. They may do a cost approach of some sort, but they normally do not pay much attention to market value. It's really an apples to oranges comparison, not just in this case, but in almost every case I'm involved in on this kind of a property on a, well, not so much special purpose, but it's owned by a religious organization, including the Archdiocese. So that's typically what happens.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Bennett, Chair of the Board of Assessors, I see you're on the line. Do you have anything to add to that? We can recognize you. May not be hearing us. Okay. I will take it. Bob Bushway. If Mr. Bushway is there, we'll recognize him.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Bob Bushway, Chief Appraiser for the town of Milton. So on this particular property, Mr. Logue is correct. Exempt properties don't get maybe as full attention as taxable property would be. But also more importantly, we value a property as in value and use and not highest and best, which Mr. Logue is using highest and best use, and that was transferring to a higher value than the present use currently. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
With that, since we had one member, I'll go to our citizen. So Ms. Kathleen Powers is on the line. She asked permission to just show a 1-minute video, which your moderator reviewed and found appropriate. Ms. Powers, if you could, we will unmute you. If you could then unmute your line. Let us know if when you'd like us to run the video, and you have up to 10 minutes to address the audience.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. If we could run the video now, that would be perfect.
Okay, we'll do so. Could you also introduce your full name and address for the audience, please?
I certainly will. I certainly will. That, town meeting members, is what St. Agatha School dismissal looks like from 4 Governors Road just yesterday afternoon during a COVID-19 light traffic day. The egress is where the Fire Station Building Committee is proposing relocating the East Milton Fire Station, that same driveway referred to by Mr. Logue. Now imagine the fire station getting an emergency call. I ask you to keep in mind that video. Good evening. My name is Kathleen Powers. My husband, daughter, and I have resided at 8 Governors Road in Milton for 16 years. I am neither an engineer nor an architect. I am not an expert in these matters. I am, however, for tonight, the collective voice of the residents of over 50 homes surrounding St. Agatha Parish who will be adversely impacted by the move of the East Milton Fire Station to the proposed location. Thank you for affording me the time to speak about our concerns and to respectfully ask each of you to vote no to the purchase of this land by the town as described in Article 38 of the town meeting warrant. If you study the votes to question 1 at the April 27 townwide election, you will note that Precinct 6, which encompasses this location, had the highest number of no votes on question 1. While the neighbors of St. Agatha, to almost every house, are very supportive of our firefighters and the need to renovate the 3 Milton fire stations, we remain steadfast in our conviction that the property next to the St. Agatha Rectory is not the best location for a renovated East Milton Fire Station. Those no votes from Precinct 6 directly correlate to the opposition to this location. While we certainly appreciate the countless hours that each member of the Fire Station Building Committee has dedicated to this project, the lack of engagement from the beginning of the residents of the 50+ homes that will be directly impacted by this relocation has not engendered trust in the process. In fact, it was not until we sent a letter to the town meeting members of Precinct 6 prior to your February 22, 2021 meeting, just over 60 days ago, was the thought of engagement with the neighbors most impacted by the fire station move even contemplated. We have finally engaged with the Fire Station Building Committee on 2 occasions with our questions and concerns, and we have read all reports and meeting minutes that are publicly available on the town and committee website. While you have undoubtedly heard from them that we have met with the neighbors, what you do not hear is the rest of the story. We have met with the neighbors and they are still in opposition. Our concerns were pushed aside, our questions were not answered, nor was our request for full due diligence factual information fulfilled. As we hand-delivered close to 280 letters to town meeting members last weekend, we were struck by how much pride our fellow citizens have in their homes and their neighborhoods. We ask you, town meeting members, to recognize the same about the neighborhood surrounding St. Agatha Parish and how relocating the East Milton Fire Station to the property next to the rectory into this residential neighborhood is the wrong decision. Why are we opposed to moving the East Milton Fire Station to the parcel of land next to 432 Adams Street? This particular purchase is a questionable investment of town funds. The FEMA flood map reflects that the St. Agatha site is only the width of Libby Road from a designated flood zone A area. The FEMA designated zone A also includes a portion of Adams and Squantum streets. The Milton Fire Department would be hindered in its attempt to traverse west on those streets. The warrant committee has recommended that the town meeting members vote to approve Article 42 of the warrant, thus adopting the revised FEMA's floodplain district boundaries. The stated purpose of the floodplain district is to, and I quote, ensure public safety through reducing the threats to life and personal injury, eliminate new hazards to emergency response officials, and reduce damage to public and private property resulting from flooding waters. In addition, Article 42 requires all developments to minimize flood damage to the proposed development and public facilities and utilities. What about the removal of the trees on the property to make room for the fire station? Will that not only exacerbate any potential flooding issue? What additional funds will need to be expended related to meeting building standards? Article 42 makes the case that this piece of land is even less attractive as a location for emergency response officials. In view of the intent and language of Article 42, we question the appropriateness of the town expending any funds for acquisition or development of this particular site so as not to hinder the Milton Fire Department from executing on its mission. There is no way that a homeowner or private investor would consider developing the site. We suggest the same be true for our town meeting members and taxpayers. Town meeting members owe it to the taxpayers to be fiscally responsible with town funds. This choice of location disregards neighborhood safety. No traffic or neighborhood impact study has been performed. Traffic from no less than 8 roads, Squantum Street, Center Street, Libby Road, Adams Street, both east and west, Rose Street, Governor's Road, to and from Brook Road, and the egress for St. Agatha Road all converge at the proposed intersection for this location. My family and I are very active parishioners of St. Agatha, and our daughter attended school there for grades K through 6. We are fortunate to have such a vibrant parish as St. Agatha. However, the parking lot is packed for bingo, Friends of Bill Wilson, daily mass, Saturday evening mass, 5 masses on Sundays, sacramental prep, CCD, weddings, funerals, committee meetings, and school activities, including after-school care, basketball, concerts, Christmas shopping night, family and movie night. It goes on, 7 days and nights a week. Contrary to what you may have heard, St. Agatha School is in no danger of closing. Have you ever witnessed the start of school or the dismissal of school? Remember that video. My husband was actually hit by a car departing the parking lot as he walked to pick up our daughter after school. The school parish and St. Agatha Road are to share an egress now wedged between the fire station and the rectory. How safe will that be when the dismissal bell rings and an emergency call comes into the fire station? There's no guarantee from the committee nor the fire chief that the fire engines will not be forced into the neighborhood based on the traffic on Adams Street when the call is initiated. The town has refused an impact study on moving the East Milton Fire Station from a commercial section to this residential area. When a call comes into the station, the cars will be forced into the neighborhood to make room for the truck. Neighborhoods full of school age and younger children. Remember the video and broaden your imagination to see what that looks like during school dismissal with children in the crosswalk and on the sidewalks and cars trying to avoid the fire engines.
You have about 3 minutes, ma'am.
Thank you. Cars forced onto the sidewalks, cars hitting each other in a chain reaction onto the crosswalk, or rushing up Governor's Road or Brook Road or onto St. Agatha Road to make room for the fire truck or avoid being delayed while waiting for the fire truck to pass. No amount of signalization is going to help when a car is trying to avoid a fire truck. We are curious to know from the Milton Police Chief his assessment of the choice of this location for the East Milton Fire Station. This site is too small. The site does not even satisfy the needs of the Milton Fire Department. The chief has stated on numerous occasions the fire department's need for equipment storage. The property does not allow for 2 bays and the proposed station will have only 1 bay. Any design on that small plot of land is overwhelming to the neighborhood, let alone the disruption of noise and 24/7 lighting affecting the homes surrounding the neighborhood. Given the size of the fire engine and equipment, it would never be considered a 3-bedroom home with a large garage as characterized by Mr. Walsh. Vacating the current site in East Milton will certainly contribute to the overdevelopment of East Milton Square. Should the fire station vacate its present location, will developers be allowed to build another set of apartments to add to the 101 units planned for behind Abbey Park and the 40 units planned for the corner of Granite Street and Mechanic Street? Do not dismiss the fact that the apartment developers are at the ready to add more units to the already congested area. Is that what we want for East Milton Square? More than once, we have heard of the revenue opportunity and the value of the land of the current East Milton site, which begs the question, what is really driving the move of the fire station out of East Milton Square?
About a minute, ma'am.
Thank you. We have heard from the committee that the 3 options within the time standards for fire stations are the purchase of the parcel of land next to the St. Agatha Rectory, the town-owned land currently leased to the Milton Arts Center, and the town-owned land currently occupied by the fire station in East Milton Square. We learned recently through the committee that the town meeting members and the neighbors in the areas surrounding the Milton Arts Center were successful in opposing that location for the East Milton Fire Station. We absolutely understand and respect their concerns. The best location with the least impact to these residential neighborhoods is the current location in East Milton Square. The Fire Station Building Committee, the engineers, the architects, the experts, if you will tell you that renovation of that building is complicated. There's not enough land, and fire emergency coverage of the town would be difficult during construction. We know land can be purchased adjacent to the current East Milton site. We cannot believe that fire emergency coverage cannot be worked out. And just because something is complicated and difficult does not mean it cannot be done. As my favorite boss and mentor frequently reminds me, first you have to want to, then you can. Please listen to the collective voice of your neighbors, fellow citizens, and voters' concerns with regard to the appropriateness of the investment of town funds in this site, the disregard for neighborhood safety, and the potential overdevelopment of East Milton Square, and vote no on Article 38. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am, and thank you for participation in town meeting. With that, we'll resume. I see 4 hands up. Ms. Hegarty, you're recognized.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hello, everyone. My name is Shannon Hegarty. I'm a town meeting member in Precinct 7. I first want to commend Mrs. Powers for speaking up and saying their piece. It's interesting to hear how the neighbors in that vicinity would view this. My concern is the overall safety with all of the inevitable expansion in East Milton Square. We have 101 units potentially going above Abbey Park, another 40 units right around the corner from that. If this property is sold, like Mrs. Powers indicated, there could be more units put up. The current East Milton Square fire station houses 2 apparatuses to serve the 3 elementary schools, Collycott, Cunningham, and St. Agatha's. I am extremely concerned that the current structure proposed for St. Agatha's will be downgraded to 1 apparatus. With all of this growth in this area and the congestion, I don't see how that is a safe, viable option. I urge my fellow town meeting members to vote no on Article 38. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. We'll proceed to Ms. Simons. You're recognized. Ms. Simons, I think you're a new town meeting member. Congratulations. If you can remember to state your name and precinct.
Yes. Yes, I am a new town meeting member and I'm happy to be that.
Which precinct?
I am a town meeting member from Precinct 5, and I just had some questions with regards to the following. Why was no traffic study done, or was there one done that hasn't been brought to our attention? I think the safety is a huge point here with a location. And what has been the engagement with the neighborhood? And how has the select board and the fire commission committee responded? What's been the involvement? I'd like to hear from people with regards to that.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Walsh, can you answer information on traffic, or Mr. Clark?
Yes, Moderator Hiss, if you are okay to recognize me, I can speak to it.
Yes, please, Mr. Clark, you're recognized.
Dan Clark, Vice Chair of the Fire Station Building Committee. So just to step back, a little over a year and a half ago, it was September of 2019. So about a year and a half ago, that was the initial meeting. Some of the abutters on St. Agatha's Road and the Fire Station Building Committee met, initially early on in the process. We didn't really know where it was going to go, if this was really going to be viable. And as the process moved along, and it seemed like this was going to be more of an option, more outreach was done. There was some Zoom meetings between myself and some of the abutters on St. Agatha's and Low Circle. And they attended some of our meetings pre-COVID back in February. I think it was February of 2019 when we still meet in person. So there was initial outreach, and then most of all of our meetings are published, and anytime anything related to East Milton was discussed in our meetings, it was put on the agenda. So there was definitely ample opportunity and engagement there. As this has come to fruition more, there's been more direct outreach and involvement outside of our regularly scheduled meetings, as Madam Chair mentioned, with regard to design charrettes and things like that. I can say that every point that was raised by Ms. Powers has been brought to the Fire Station Buildings Committee's attention. And either the committee, Chief Madden, or our architect has provided responses and answers to those questions, whether it's through design mitigation that would be incorporated into the project or other factors or clarifying intent. So there's that component to it. As for safety, I think it's important that the current East Milton station has 2 apparatus bays and there are 2 engines in there. However, one of them is the backup engine. It's not in service. There's no crew for it. So it is currently a 1-engine station. So I just wanted to make sure that that point was clarified.
Do you have an answer on the traffic study?
Yes, and with regard to the traffic study, so we did an analysis to understand what moving the station would do for the public safety and for servicing the residents. We relied on our architect who has worked significantly inside the 494 corridor and the 128 corridor, relocating stations or new stations or renovations. And in our chief architect's 20 years of experience, they've only ever done a traffic study once. It's just not something that is typically done or ever really done for fire stations, because especially with a substation, we have three on-duty firefighters that will be there, and it's a 24-hour shift, so it changes once a day. So once a day, 3 cars are coming in and 3 are going out. And there's only approximately an average of 2.5 runs per day for fire engine responses out of that engine or out of that substation. So we're talking about 5 to 6 additional traffic runs in that area. So it's so minimal that it's usually you're going to pay a traffic engineer to say that there's no change, there's no impact. So what we focused on was what's the impact? Can the engine get to where it needs to go safely? And the number one thing that when you look at any standards or advice out there is to put fire stations on the main thoroughfares in the center, so that when they want to respond, people can be on wider roads, they can pull over to the side, the truck moves by, and they can drive again. They don't seek alternative routes because the truck has to move through quickly and moves through quickly and it's gone. The engine's responding in 4 minutes or less. So I think that's important to remember.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Simons, any follow-up, or you set? Your hand's still up. I was just asking.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm set. I'm set for now.
Very good. Thank you. We'll go to Mr. Morrissey. You're recognized.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator. Frank Morrissey, Precinct 6. I have some grave concerns about locating the firehouse in the St. Agatha lot. It's a single-family, high-density area, and Mr. Walsh analogized the firehouse to dropping a 3-bedroom home with a modest garage into the neighborhood. That analogy couldn't be less apt. What potentially you're going to see from the firehouse are fire trucks and emergency equipment racing out of the firehouse into that busy, dangerous street, the intersection of Squantum Street and Adams Street. And I thought Ms. Powers did a wonderful job explaining the dangers and the concerns with respect to the location of the firehouse, and especially that very, very busy street. So to liken it to a 3-bedroom house is irresponsible in my view. Second, I had a number of questions. My first question is the runtime analysis. Was the runtime analysis done during the middle of the COVID lockdown, or was there any runtime analysis done after the dismissal of the school, or after the release of people from a very, very busy parish? Was there any runtime analysis done when the very busy school and the very busy church was in operation, and was that taken into account? My second question has to do with the lack of the traffic study. Just looking at that small video and looking at all of the busy traffic, that intersection of Squantum and Adams is one of the most dangerous parts of Milton. It's dangerous now without a fire station and emergency equipment rushing up and down the street with little children crossing the street going to school and parents dropping them off and people attending funerals and all of the activity that's currently going on in that area. My question is, why was no traffic study done? And why is that a responsible way to proceed? And why are we relying on architects, a sub-question, why are we relying on architects to analyze the traffic risks and the safety? Compounding all this is that the lot is in a flood zone and it rained heavily this week. I take that back, moderately this week. And the whole area was saddled with puddles and so forth. Does the flood zone impact the response time of the emergency equipment? Will the potential of flooding interfere with the equipment getting to the emergencies on time? And will it create a safety risk to the children and the old people trying to go to mass and to attend school? Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'll wait for the answers. I may have follow-ups.
Thank you. I think I'll go back to Mr. Walsh or Mr. Clark on the runtime answer.
Thank you, Moderator Hiss. So the runtime and sorry, go ahead.
You could identify yourself again.
Sorry, Dan Clark, Vice Chair of Fire Station Building Committee. So the runtime analysis was actually done early on in the process when our committee was formed. It was completed somewhere around 2018. I forget the timing in the year, but it took the calls that we know where the fire station had responded to over a 5-year period prior and analyzed that. And input into that analysis was traffic data available through Department of Transportation traffic studies, town traffic studies, traffic data from Google and other sources that's publicly available. And that was incorporated in the model. And so traffic at various times of the day, when the analysis is run, it looks at, it does it through hour intervals. And so, you know, a 24-hour cycle throughout different portions of the year is analyzed. So I feel strongly in saying that, yes, all those different scenarios that you presented were analyzed. With regard to why are we relying on architects? So the architect is the lead of the project. All the engineers work under the architect. And so we're relying on that architect. And when I use the phrase architect, it would be the architect, the consultants, the owner's project managers, you know, who all specialize in public safety buildings. Our architect only does public safety buildings. Most of the engineers that work on with our architect, you know, focus a lot on public safety buildings. So that's why we're relying on them. They are the experts in this matter, similar to Mr. Emmett Logue tonight. You know, he is the expert in this matter, and that's why we're relying on them. I think it's important to realize that, you know, this 75% of the calls from the existing East Milton station go to the west side of the deck. Approximately 40 to 50% of those calls go down Adams Street currently. So a lot of the calls that the East Milton Fire District is responding to already drive by this location. So I think that's important to realize. And by pulling it centrally located, it actually does a better even distribution out of that central hub for the fire district to kind of spread it out so it's not as concentrated. So it's actually a benefit. And I'm actually going to share my screen with regard to the flood question, just because I think it's something that's a lot better to visualize. So this is the current FEMA map for this location. And you can see here this overlay. This is what was talked about earlier. This is a zone A in this location, and then this white line up here, it turns into zone AE. There's a big difference between that. Zone A has been a flood zone that's been studied, and they know how FEMA has anticipated how high you need to build for it. So there's a base flood elevation, meaning, and in this zone AE right here, it's 11 feet above sea level. So any building that goes in that area, you've got to be above that. FEMA hadn't studied this when this was published in 2014, I believe, and you can see the area back here. It doesn't have a base flood elevation. For reference, the site that we're talking about sits at about 15.5 to 16 feet. So it's about 5 to 6 feet above the base flood elevation for the over on Squantum Street. Additionally, the building sits slightly higher than that. So we'd be at around 7.5 feet above the base flood elevation. But I think it's also important to focus that it's not in the flood zone. It's adjacent to one. And this is an older map that's, as Ms. Collins mentioned earlier, and this is what's been currently adopted. This is the newer map that has been released by FEMA in 2020 that's going through a review process. So towns and experts in that matter can provide feedback. And as you can see, this area is, a culvert from here under to Libby Road where the brook enters. And in this proposed map, which will be very likely adopted in 2021, you can see that it's, because of this being a culvert, it's just a brook at this point. So the flood zone is really shrinking. There's still no base flood elevation provided for this zone A that you see adjacent to the site. But based on the existing data, we know that it's 11 and we're above that. It's also important that the design of the station, there's no basement. The mechanical and the electrical units are up off the floor. It's a resilient design. Our architect has selected materials that are resistant. So if they do get wet, they're easily moisture resistant, things like that. So there has been a lot of thought into being near a flood zone, but it's important to recognize we're not in a flood zone.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Morrissey, your hand is still up.
Yes, I'm not sure my question about the runtime was answered. We saw how busy Squantum and Adams Street is when school is being released. Was the runtime analyzed during those release times, which happened Monday through Friday? Second, was any runtime analysis done for Sunday, which is extraordinarily busy? Third, was any runtime analysis done for holidays such as Christmas and Thanksgiving, where that area gets a lot of use? That's my first follow-up question. My second follow-up question is reverting back to something Ms. Powers mentioned. Are there plans to expand this 3-bedroom home? I met with Chief Madden and several of the other residents, and he's already talked about potentially storing boats and other equipment that's not being used in the 3-bedroom structure next to St. Agatha's. So I'd like to learn about that. But my principal comment is about the runtime and the safety issues with respect to that busy street. That movie that Ms. Powers showed happens every day, twice a day, and sometimes more than twice a day, and on the weekends. That's an inherently dangerous area to have emergency equipment rushing into. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Mr. Morrissey. Mr. Clark, perhaps you could just
yes, I can follow up on that. Time. Yeah, Vice Chair Dan Clark, Fire Station Building Committee. So I think it's, I'm not sure if everybody's aware, but there's actually a town project separate from the fire station project to signalize Squantum and Adams Street. So that's, I think, something important to help in that with the traffic. Those lights will be or signalized with the lights around the square leading into East Milton. So that's already one betterment separate from our design and our process. And I think the video that Ms. Powers shows is important, because as you look at that, you notice that it's actually not that traffic that's coming out there. It's not a very formalized process or traffic flow. It is actually a driveway exit that's been turned into kind of a pass-through off of St. Agatha's, and it's kind of never really been designed to accommodate what it is. As part of our process, it would really formalize that. It would straighten it out, and we would be able to actually have better traffic and make it a safer intersection. So to touch on that point, I think that's important. As for the traffic runtime analysis, yes, peak traffic flows were used. And so, whatever was the busiest, whether that's school or Sunday, or they were all about the same, those were incorporated into our runtime analysis. And I hope that answers both of your questions.
Thank you. Ms. Collins, the select board, I think you have some help here. You can provide some help.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Yes, I did want to reiterate that that the traffic pattern will be improved, because this would be designed in concert with the planned redesign for Squantum and Adams. And we've only seen a concept from the traffic committee so far, but there would be provisions for bike lanes and better pedestrian access. As Mr. Clark said, there would be re-signalization that would coordinate actually into East Milton Square, making it much safer, especially for emergency vehicles like ambulances. And in public safety, normally there aren't traffic studies, and there are only a few trips being added. And I understand that people are concerned given that video, and it is disconcerting and difficult and dangerous down there right now. But I think this would really help. As far as traffic studies, there are traffic studies that were done in conjunction with the beginning of that plan redesign for Squantum and Adams, and people can get those. We have them at DPW.
Thank you, ma'am. We've got about a dozen people who wish to speak. I see Mr. O'Halloran, Mr. Collins, Mr. Walker, Asher Wakeem, Renz, Tanik, and Kursky, then McCarthy, and first. So we'll go with Mr. O'Halloran. You're recognized.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator. Brian O'Halloran, Precinct 3. Listen to Mrs. Powers' presentation, and I also have some concerns about safety. I have two questions. First is, do you have any data around the average number of deployments per day out of the East Milton Fire Station for either one or two engines? And secondly, do you have any data around peak times of the day or days of the week out of the East Milton station? Thank you.
I don't quite understand peak times out of the station. Could you just clarify?
Yeah, I understand anecdotally that, for example, police tend to see more crimes committed on a Tuesday night, for example. And so is there a similar sort of behavior around the fire station?
So the runs cluster, you mean, at certain times?
Around particular times or days of the week.
I see, thank you. We can recognize Mr. Walsh. I see your hand up. Can you answer this, or should we go to Mr. Clark?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Well, I think it's a number of questions coming up and very understandable.
Actually, Mr. Walsh, I think we've got Chief Madden actually on the line who may be able to provide some hard data.
I can speak in later. Thank you.
Why don't we try that? Chief Madden, you're recognized?
Yes, good evening. Chief Madden, Chief of Milton Fire Department, Chris Madden. I do, there's a couple of different things, and I hear safety is one of the major things that keeps coming up. And I think it's important for the people to know that safety is our job. Safety is our #1 priority. Safety is always paramount in everything that we do. It's just the nature of our game. One of the things that, you know, you're taught as a new firefighter when the first time you get behind the wheel is that if you can't get to an incident safely, then you are no good to the citizens that have actually called you. So anytime a new firefighter comes in, they have to go through a year's worth of training before they're actually allowed to drive on responses. And another thing for us is we're not just one person driving in a vehicle. We're a crew of 3. You have the driver, you have the lieutenant, which sits in the passenger seat, and the lieutenant's really in charge of that apparatus. The lieutenant is the eyes, the ears. You can see everything, the exact same stuff that the person driving is going through. And he has the right and the ability to tell that person to slow down, be careful. We can't say speed, you know, it's just one of those things that we don't do. When we go lights and sirens, we are actually asking for permission to pass. We're not going on the opposite side. We're not flying. We can't speed. When we pull up to a red light and our lights and sirens are on, we're requesting permission to go through that intersection. That's how we operate. So again, like I said, if we don't get to the incident, we're no good. So safety is just paramount in everything that we do. So that's probably, you know, a lot of people saying, you know, it's a busy intersection, you know, we're concerned for the safety. The fire department is extremely professional. We train. You always see us out training, driver training. We're constantly going into neighborhoods to drive and train so we can understand the neighborhoods. You know, Ms. Powers is correct. When I said that I can't guarantee that we will never go into the neighborhood. It's because we don't. We go into the neighborhoods for calls. We go into the neighborhood to practice driving, to make sure that we understand what the neighborhoods are going through and any changes in the neighborhood, where the hydrants are. You know, we're always around. It's our first, especially the members of East Milton, you know, it's their first two districts, which, you know, that's important to them. They need to know where the hydrants are, where the house is situated, you know, where it's what we do. We're constantly practicing and going through this. So we have that in the back of our mind. So when the call does come, we have the ability to respond and we're, you know, it's something that we call size up. We size up every incident, and we size up the incident, and we teach them from the fire academy from day one. You size up the incident on your way to work that day, or, you know, it's raining or snowing. It's going to affect everything that you do. So we have that size up. We're constantly in, you know, you ask a firefighter, you know, where a street is. You know, one of the things that, you know, they say, oh, I'm from Milton, you know, like, you know, I live on such and such a street. It's a small street, you wouldn't know it. 95% of the firefighters on this job know what 95% of the streets are because we go into the neighborhoods to investigate that. So we are in the neighborhoods. It's our job to be in the neighborhoods. It's our job to go out there and know exactly what we're responding to and who we're responding to.
Hey, Chief Madden, do you happen to have the data Mr. O'Halloran asked about the runs out of East Milton and any question about peak times?
Right, yeah, so we average about 3 runs per day, spread out through the 24 hours. I don't have the peak times. I don't have that information. We are upgrading our software, and hopefully after July 1st, when we upgrade our software, we'll be able to dial it down like that. But, you know, and that's part of the other part is that we always drive through there anyways. We are responding through that intersection on a regular basis. The only way to get from the east side of the expressway to the majority of our runs is to come over the Antwerp Street overpass, and it puts us right at the corner of Adams Street, right in front of the post office, and we take a right or a left, and we go, you know, Adams or Brook to those ones. So we are in those neighborhoods in that intersection on a regular basis.
One last, Mr. Morrissey had a question on storage at the station. Could you address that?
Yes. So again, you know, when you look at it, so currently you see 2 apparatus in that East Milton station. One is fully staffed, the other is a spare. In case one of our engines breaks, we'll take that and put it in service. It is not fully staffed. So only 1 apparatus responds out of that station. That is it. So when you look at it and you know, you sit there and you look, this is a 100-year building. And so if the pandemic or, you know, my time in the fire service has taught me anything, is that we need to be prepared for the worst. We need to be able to make sure that we have the equipment and the tools ready to serve the citizens. So and I talked to Chief Grant about this, and Chief Grant said, oh, we could get by with the 1 base station. And you know, and we sat down and we talked about this after I became chief, and you know, that station and you know, what I was looking for, what I'm looking for is the fact that we don't know what's going to happen in 100 years or 50 years or 40 years. If there's a vital piece of equipment and we need to store an engine, you know, store a boat, store some sort of equipment, we do have a hazardous materials trailer, which is basically personal protective equipment that we use in case of emergency, which we have used tremendously over the last year. We used a lot of that equipment during this pandemic. When this first happened and we were using hazmat suits to go into homes with COVID, we use that equipment. That trailer is stored outside right now. It'd be nice to be able to bring that inside and protect it and have it a little bit longer. You know, we do have a brush truck up at Engine 4. We do have a UTV. We do have a boat. The boat is stuffed in the basement downstairs up at Engine 4, which is the Atherton Street station. So it's a good boat. It's old, but it needs to be replaced, and it's not a bad idea to keep that replacement around in case the boat's in service needs to be, is broken and we need to get a boat right away. So that's what I'm just looking for.
Okay.
We look, anytime anybody does a reservation in their house, renovation in their house, as soon as you're done with it, you're like, oh, I should have added more space. I should have added more space, more closet space. And that's what I was looking for. That's just what, for me, looking the long range storage.
Understood. Thank you for that answer. Mr. Helen, any follow-up or are we done?
Moderator, I have the answer to his question.
Mr. Clark, you're recognized.
Vice Chair Dan Clark, Fire Station Building Committee. I'll just share it on screen because it's easier than trying to regurgitate the numbers. This is for the East Milton Station. This is from fiscal year 2017, hour by hour average for the year of the number of calls. So you can really see that the distribution is actually concentrated from like 9 to 12 is kind of the peak volume, 9 a.m. to 12 a.m. I'm sorry, 9 a.m. until about noon. And so that's kind of the peak. Otherwise, it's pretty evenly distributed. 12 a.m. to about 7 a.m. is kind of the quiet time in there. So I hope that's helpful for answering the question. It's pretty similar distribution for the other stations too.
Thank you.
And yes, the average of 3 is the correct number.
Thank you.
Mr. Moderator?
Yes, Mr. Walsh.
Thank you. I think it's also important to know, it'll add to this. I was confused about something that luckily Chief Grant educated me on, and it's not intuitive. And we have 2 public safety departments in town. We have the fire department and we have the police department. We are all of us as residents are more accustomed to police cruises that are cruising the town, that when they have to go to an emergency, they flip their siren on and they will travel at speeds greater than the speed limit. I think what we need to understand, I didn't, was that fire trucks, because they're carrying out a lot of weight and water, do not exceed the speed limit. They travel at the speed limit, and the chief just explained, they'll put their siren on with the expectation that a car will move over as they pass, and all of us think as residents, that's exactly what we see. And then lastly, I'm glad that Dan was able to share that breakdown of calls to address the question, but keep this in mind too. We had 5 years of history of all the actual calls. Half of all of the East Milton Station calls for the last 5 years, meaning today, drive straight past St. Agatha's Church, St. Agatha's School, in the rectory up to that corner that the chief was trying to make. So half of those, almost 3 calls a day, are already going there, and we'll lose some of those because they'll be able, in this new location, because they'll be able to come out, turn right, and service the district without passing those. So thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. Mr. O'Halloran, do we answer your questions?
Yes. Yes. Thank you very much. I appreciate Chief's answers. Appreciate all the work that they do.
Thank you. We'll go to Mr. Walker. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Leroy Walker, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 10. I came into this evening with a fairly certain idea about what I knew about this article, where we were on this article, and how I was going to vote. But let me say at the outset, one of the things that I appreciate most about our town is the weight that it gives to the views of neighbors and abutters who are affected most. And in this instance, I was certainly moved by Ms. Powers' comments and presentation that she made on behalf of her family and on behalf of her neighbors. So let me just recap what I think I heard. The Fire Station Building Committee met with the neighbors before the site was determined. So obviously those meetings weren't particularly valuable since no one would raise concerns about a fire station where the site hadn't been determined yet. And it was stated that all of the questions that were raised by Ms. Powers and her neighbors have been answered. Well, it would seem to me that that certainly is not the case, since I don't think they would be in front of this body raising the concerns that they had if their questions had been answered. And let me just point out that when development occurs in this town, one of the things that we compel developers to do is to try their best to get the support of the people who are affected most by the development. It might be the neighborhood association, it might be residents, some saying, well, I'm in favor of this, and other residents saying I'm not in favor. But normally we compel developers to gain the support of the community. This is an instance where it seems to me that a traffic study would be in order. Mr. Clark indicated that that's not usually done for fire stations, but it seems to be a particular need here. This particular location is not in the flood zone, but it's adjacent to one. So my takeaway from that is that I guess we shouldn't be concerned. And
Mr. Walker, if I can interrupt.
Yeah.
Ms. Deborah Felton raises a point of order. Does Mr. Walker have a question? My answer is he doesn't have to have a question. He can use his time however he would like. So Mr. Walker, you may continue. Thank you.
Thank you. And I do have a question.
Okay.
Eventually. The average calls data that we just looked at was stated that the peak period seems to be 9 to 12. I would suggest that based on the numbers, it's 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. if we looked at that chart again. But here's the question. And I may be prepared to move that we refer this back to the select board for further study. But here's the question. If the will of the neighbors, the customers who are to be served is that this is not the right site, then let's hear again what the downside is of using the current site. And the general statement that it's not suitable for a 21st century fire station would not be an acceptable answer.
Understood.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll start, Ms. Collins, this is your article. Would you like to address that or defer off to Mr. Walsh, Mr. Clark?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I will begin to address that. I would say that the customer, if you will, is anyone who the fire stations protect. Also, we have direct abutters who are not here, weren't on that petition, if that's the issue for people. And answers were given at the forum, and perhaps some of them were not answers that people were looking for. There is a traffic study. It can be forwarded to anyone who would like it. They can email Mr. Dennehy. So those are some initial thoughts, and then I'll turn it over to Mr. Walsh and Mr. Clark. Thank you.
Mr. Walsh?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I didn't know if you had others in line with more questions, or if you wanted me to address the questions.
No, I think we take them one at a time. Mr. Walker had a question. If you could,
Mr. Walker's, yes.
Yes.
So, Mr. Walker.
Or is it the chief? Who do you think is best served here? Mr. Walsh, I've lost you.
No, I'm sorry, Mr. Moderator. I thought you were asking Mr. Walker that question. I apologize.
No, I'm asking you.
Yeah, so I'll take a first pass on the, basically Mr. Walker's question was, why not the current site?
Right.
So the site that we're looking at, the plot of land that we're looking at tonight is a half acre. It is much more than twice the size of the existing East Milton site. The existing East Milton site, the lot of land is too small to build a fire station today to accommodate the size of apparatus and all the additional safety equipment that firefighters need. Today, our firefighters in all of our stations don't have the proper gear to decontaminate. That's why cancer rates are high with firefighters. So when we look at all of the requirements in the building standards of today, that site is not large enough. But I'd like to also add, because it's an opportunity to do that, that station was built in 1953. The deck was not there in 1953. So shortly later, in the 50s, they started building the deck. They dramatically changed the traffic patterns, and they've gotten worse. And so we mentioned several times, 75% of the call volume is for that fire district, for that fire engine is on the west side of the expressway. They take a minute to a minute and 20 seconds to go from that fire station. And this is not at peak traffic. This is anytime to that fire station to go around that long laborious loop and get over to where the post office is, where I could stand an old guy and throw a rock and hit the East Milton Fire Station. It's a short distance, and they spend over a minute to get there, to get to 75% of their calls. It is a terrible location, the current location. There's a lot of evidence, and anyone can Google this. The burn rates of the traditional homes that are being built now are substantially faster, and the standards of getting to those 90% of those addresses within 4 minutes may very well get reduced. And the burn rate, the recommendation many are making, are saying get there within 3 minutes. It is a substandard size. It cannot accommodate the building that's appropriate for a safe fire station. It is in a horrible location, and it does not serve the overwhelming majority of the East Milton Fire District safely. So 75% of the residents are not served well, and they're being put at risk the longer we stay there. So I'm not sure how stronger I can say it. I would say the Fire Space Needs Committee did an exhaustive study. We did. Our results have been on our website. We did present it a few times. I'm not sure that they'd want to take us out tonight, but if you want me to take the report on and walk through tonight, it'll be lengthy, but we have it.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Ms. Collins, I see your hand raised, and the chief as well. You recognize Ms. Collins?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I had forgotten that Mr. Walker asked why we don't just refer this back to the select board. If that's done, it's not clear that we will be able to come back with this particular parcel. The Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Boston was interested in having a close this summer, and given their process for disposition of land, they wouldn't be going through a process again until spring. And it's not clear. As I said, they were very eager to have this done this summer. Thank you.
Thank you. Chief Madden, I'll recognize you. Mr. Walker is a precise man. Do you have some, briefly, can you give some specific examples of that would answer his question of why the building, for example? Mr. Walsh just answered the site. If you could help us.
Yeah, so Chief Madden, Chief of the Milton Fire Department. So I guess I can go back to, and I know you should be brief, but when I worked at East Milton with Chief Grant for several years, and I absolutely love working there. And so when he first came up with the idea and told me that he wasn't, looking at that current location, that was no good. I was aggravated with him, and I said he didn't give it a fair chance. And so when I became chief, I had the opportunity to sit with the architect, myself and firefighter Paul Gardner, who was also on the fire station building committee. We sat down with the architect, and we were going to show Chief Grant that we could do the job better than him. And as we went through, so there's a lot of different things that go into the fire stations. That it's not just a garage. So when we go to a hazardous material call, we break up into 3 zones. We have the hot zone, the warm zone, and the cold zone. And the hot zone is obviously the one that's the most contaminated, the most dangerous. And when we started going through the 3 zones with the architect, the hot zone in the firehouse, the most dangerous one is the apparatus bay. You have all the carcinogens from our gear, from the sulfur from the exhaust of the diesel fuel, the road salt. It's just that's some of the stuff that we're trying to get rid of. So the hot zone, it was there, and then we started trying to fit in where we needed to the decontamination room. So we tried fitting in a decontamination room on the first floor because that's where it belongs. So we go from the hot zone to the warm zone where you start to the decontamination process. And so when you try and fit that in, and it's like, okay, well now we have this decontamination room, but now we need room to keep the gear when it's clean. So now we're starting to get into the green zone. And it's just, the space just wasn't adequate. And then we also needed a place to invite the public in. So, you had no space for any kind of room in case somebody got hurt and we or had to come into the firehouse for any kind of reason. You ran out of space. And then, you know, any kind of office space, it ran out really, really quick. And you know, and I cursed Chief Grant after that meeting and said, you know, he was right. And that's where I really started looking at the St. Agatha site. You know, I had to stop looking at the problem with my heart, and I had to look at it with my head, and really sit there and look at some of the other locations that the building committee had come up. And the site is big enough. It is big enough to house a 21st century firehouse. It really is. The location, you know, if you take the East Milton response district and you took a pin and you dropped it, it's pretty close to where that is. The current location right now is very, very close to the Quincy border on two sides. And then when you look at us coming across the highway, coming from the east side of the highway to the west side, basically, like I said, it's the Antwerp Street overpass is the only way to get over to the west side of the district, unless you went further down and then came Squantum Street. That kind of couple of things that kind of stood out to me why this location is the better one. And the current location, again, I absolutely loved working there. I love my time. As you can tell, I love to speak. I love to speak about my job. And the neighbors that would come in and visit the firehouse on a regular basis on the Saturday mornings when the kids, I mean, you go down there on a Saturday morning or a Sunday morning and there's constantly people, neighbors, walking their kids and coming in and showing their kids the firehouse. And hopefully when this COVID thing is over, we'll invite these kids back in to see the fire trucks. So, you know, I love talking about my job and what I do. So again, I had to stop thinking with my heart, and I had to start thinking with my head as to, you know, come up with a real solution to this problem. And I hope that answers Mr. Walker's question.
Thank you, Chief. Mr. Walker?
That's helpful information. I think that there's still a need for a traffic study. Chair Collins mentioned that some traffic studies have been done for, I guess, the signaling that they're going to put on Squantum Street or something in that area, but a traffic study that has the fire station in the new or the proposed location is the type of traffic study that I think would be most helpful to the neighbors and most helpful to this discussion. So I'm not going to make the motion to refer back yet, but I'm reserving my judgment on that. I'd like to hear from other speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Collins, yes, if you could be brief. Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I just wanted to note that the traffic study is from 2009 and 2019, and that I've been told that really the number of trips is so minimal that it wouldn't trigger a new study, and it's 50 feet away from this location. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll now recognize Ms. Jennifer Renz. Ma'am, you're recognized.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Jennifer Renz, 48 Walnut Street, Precinct 3, also in a butter to the headquarter fire station. My husband, Justin, at the February town meeting, spoke in support to living next to a fire station. And I was wondering if I could just make a statement echoing his sentiments as a direct abutter tonight.
Yes, please.
Okay. If I look out my kitchen window, the central fire station is my diagonal neighbor. I have been a Walnut Street resident for the past 10 years and a lifelong Milton resident. Walnut Street consists of 10 homes, of which 19 children under the age of 18 reside. It is my understanding that 25 to 30% of all calls to headquarters necessitate the firefighters to exit into my residential neighborhood, specifically onto Walnut Street, as opposed to exiting onto Canton Avenue. The firefighters are very respectful to not turn their sirens on the trucks on Walnut Street, waiting until they exit the neighborhood onto Reedsdale Road. They're also very sensitive when returning back from a call via Walnut to use caution, as they are all aware of the many children living on the street. The firefighters have been and continue to be great neighbors, very courteous and an asset to my neighborhood. My husband and I bought our current home knowing the central fire station would be our direct neighbor. Personally, It's a comfort to me knowing that headquarters is right across the street, rather than it being seen as a distraction or a disturbance, or even what I'm hearing tonight, like a danger. That hasn't been the case for my family living as abutters to the Central Fire Station for the past 10 years. I also would like to add that since September of 2018, my husband and I, and a few of our neighbors who are direct abutters as well, have been attending each and every fire station building committee meeting, as we feel we are large stakeholders in the development of the headquarters site and wanted to be able to have a voice in the process. Now, we looked those meetings up. We went online, we found out when these fire station building committees were going to be held, and we went to them. Throughout the years, and this process has been years in the making, the Fire Station Building Committee has worked well with the neighbors in the town center, always accepting our questions or comments thoughtfully and providing feedback. Some designs of the headquarters site have been tweaked throughout the past months due to neighborhood comments and concerns. The Fire Station Building Committee has listened to us. It has been a good working relationship for the past 3 years. In addition, we have attended numerous master plan implementation committee meetings that have focused on the impact the Central Fire Station construction may have on future amenities and the remaining green space and surrounding town center area. I support the fire station project as a lifelong resident of the town of Milton. I support the fire station project as a town meeting member. I support this fire station project as a direct abutter to the central headquarters site. And I hope tonight my fellow town meeting members will support and pass this very important article. Thank you for your time, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, ma'am. We'll go to Ms. Friedman Hannah. Ma'am, you're recognized.
Hi, Karen Friedman Hannah, Precinct 2. I rise similarly to the last speaker in strong support of this article. I've listened to what the abutters have to say, and I understand that they have concerns. However, if ever this was a time to trust the process, I think this is it. We've had a fire station committee in the works and having these meetings for quite some time. We've heard updates the last couple of town meetings. They've been extremely transparent about the process. And it appears to me that this has been extremely well vetted and well understood of the pros and cons of every single locale. And this one truly does seem to be a positive one to be making the move on. And furthermore, our firefighters deserve our attention to this now. There have been so many reasons why they shouldn't still be in the fire stations that they're in, and they've made do, and they have put themselves at risk, and it is time. It is time for us to make things better. It benefits us all to have a strong fire department. It benefits us all to have firefighters who take pride in not only their work, but in their surroundings and feel that they want to stay a part of Milton as a community and do us service. I strongly, strongly hope that we can make this article go through tonight and support this project and work to make it the best fire department and locales that we possibly can. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. By the way, a question came in on the Q&A. Just how do we make sure that the speakers are town meeting members? I'm sitting here at the Council on Aging with the town clerk, and she and her staff vet everybody that comes into the Zoom attendee session. And so she looks at me if there's any trouble, and so far we have no trouble. So the town clerk is on it, I'm comforted by it. So with that, we'll go to Ms. Joan Gankarski. Ma'am, you're recognized.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator, and thank you. About 5 minutes down the road from the East Milton Firehouse is the National Fire Protection Association on Willard Street, which many of you have passed over the years. This association is the Center for Fire Science, Fire Engineering, and develops the standards for fire protection for the United States. These are the standards which this committee has been using over the last 5 years. I've been following this committee and have been very impressed with the work that they have done. Years ago, I had the opportunity to work for the National Fire Protection Association in their Bureau of Health Statistics, and realize and wish you to realize that this work is done using the most up-to-date standards in engineering and science, and not just developed because of town politics or just choosing a site willy-nilly. And as we've heard, there were over 50 sites that were vetted to come up with this site. Although it may not sit in everyone's best interest, or this is not the one you want, you must realize that this committee has worked 5 years to come up with that which is the best. And to be honest with you, having had worked there and being a proud daughter of a firefighter who actually was a driver, I would love to have a firehouse as close to my house as possible. And here's the statistic. Fire grows exponentially. If it's 4 feet right now, in 3 minutes, it will be 16 feet. In another 3 minutes, it will be 256 square feet. In another 3 minutes, it will be 65,500 feet. So the faster the firefighters get to your home, the less damage there will be done, and the more likely your home will be saved. And if there's need for rescue, be thankful that the firefighters are there in the quickest manner. And it doesn't take that extra minute to go around the loop to get to you over on the other side of Milton. And I'm just asking you to support this, which is being brought to us this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. We'll go to Ms. Vicky McCarthy. Ms. McCarthy, you're recognized. Ms. McCarthy, you're on mute. We're sending in some help, Ms. McCarthy.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Vicky McCarthy, Precinct 8. And I rise to commend Ms. Powers for the wonderful presentation. And I give her so much credit for having the courage to come as a private citizen and address town meeting. She knew nothing much about town meeting until this whole situation came up. I think she brought out many, many good points, and I'm asking my fellow town meeting members to support the citizens that live the closest to this proposed fire station and vote no tonight for that reason. Something that you might be able to get clarified for me. Mr. Walsh mentioned that St. Agatha's responded to the RFP. According to Father Pilardi, our pastor, and it was the fire station committee that came to him to ask him to consider a 99-year lease or selling the property. So it gives a little different flavor. I know that after a fashion, he needed to put something down in writing, but he was not the one to initiate this whole process. So I just, maybe you could get that clarified for me. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Yes, I will.
Thank you.
And we'll, by the way, there's a, if I could, there's a point of order on a motion. If I could just answer this question, I'll come to the members because I understand what they're asking. Mr. Walsh, could you answer the question on the member asked?
I can moderate. Did somebody else speak, or was that me?
Nope, go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Moderator, we did put out an RFP. We had been looking, I said even in my earlier presentation, that we were actively looking around town to try to find a location that might work, but we had an RFP out. So I don't specifically recall if we ever engaged Father Pilati before the RFP was out there. I don't think so, but we did have discussions with them before they submitted their formal response, but they indicated to us that they were interested and wanted to have discussions. I think that's the best way I can represent it. If I could take the opportunity, if you think about East Milton, how densely populated it is in that entire fire district, you're hard to find an open half-acre parcel that's well suited. In this case, if I was sitting in that new fire station, directly to my left would be the rectory or the people that sold us the property. Directly to my right would be a road. And to the right of that would be a commercial property. Directly in front would be a very large street, and directly behind is a lot of open St. Agatha property. It's one of the only lots we could find in East Milton that would have the least impact on right up against residential homes. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Moderator, can I make a clarification to Mr. Walsh's response?
Could you introduce yourself, Mr.
Yep. Dan Clark, Vice Chair of the Fire Station Building Committee. Just for full transparency, I handled the RFP for our committee, and we did reach out to St. Agatha's to make them aware that we had an RFP out. The first time we issued it, we had no responses. So we reissued it a second time and tried to make people more aware that it was out there and we were looking. So there was an outreach from the Fire Station Building Committee to make them aware that there was an RFP out there and that they did have, their land potentially had land that could fit the RFP. So there was some outreach for full transparency.
Thank you. I need a minute to consult with town council. I'll just be brief and be right back. There was a question by member Scott Johnson to limit debate to 3 minutes. By tradition, we've never limited debate in my understanding, and even our bylaws speak to a limiting to only a 5 minute. So if Mr. Johnson wants to make a motion to move the question, so to speak, that does two things. We did this the other night. It limits debate to 5 minutes per speaker, and no speaker may speak twice. So Mr. Johnson, do you want to make that motion if I clarify your question? If you put into the Q&A, so moved. And if I don't? see it, we'll carry on. Okay, I don't see it. There's a lot of people that want to speak. Up, so moved. Okay, is there a second on moving the question? There's a second. Okay, this is a debatable motion. There's a lot of hands up. Tell you what, why don't we just go to a vote on this? Because otherwise, a lot of people are going to lose their hands that are raised to speak, and someone is asking whose hands are raised. Actually, Mr. Johnson now withdraws his motion. Very good. So I will consider that withdrawn. Perhaps speakers could limit their time. Ms. McCarthy was 1 minute and 41 seconds. Ms. Gancarsi was only 3 minutes and 30 seconds. I think that was brief, so I appreciate the brevity. Perhaps we can all do the same. With that, I'll go to Mr. Brian Kelly, you're recognized. By the way, I'll list the whole group right now. We have Brian Kelly, Gene Burns, Jay Fundling, William White, Michael Chinman, Christopher Hart, Emily Martin, James Mulligan, Larry Johnson, and Mrs. Simons, Rebecca Simons, second time. So we'll go to Mr. Kelly, you're recognized.
Thank you, Brian Kelly, town meeting member, precinct 7. On the east side of the expressway, and echoing Jennifer Rentz, I recently had to go over to Magnolia and Walnut. There's a home on the corner of Magnolia and Walnut, across from the headquarters station. And I met the gentleman there, and I actually asked him about the fire station, and he said the same thing that Jennifer said. He said that he felt that the firefighters were very respectful of the neighbors, and he had no complaints. And so that made me feel a little better for the neighbors on the new proposed station. Another thing is I lease office space right next to that lot in that commercial building, right beside where the station is supposed to go. So could I ask, could someone, Dan Clark, can you put up a Google map for me of East Milton? I think it's important that people see the street view from the sky, and I'm going to explain something I think is critical here.
Why don't we have, let's see if our Zoom administrator can do that. We'll get that for you, Mr. Kelly, here.
Okay, I appreciate it.
I have it available if you want, Mr. Moderator, to save time.
Mike, you got it? Yeah, we've got it up here. Thank you.
Good. Thanks, Mike. Okay, just zoom out a little bit more, please, Mike. Okay, so my biggest challenge in getting to my office, which will be right next to the fire station, which is just that small street between us, is I usually walk because the traffic can be so horrible. But when I leave my house, I'll drive and I'll go over the Granite Ave overpass, you can see, or some people call it the Antwerp overpass. And that is where I hit most of the congestion. That's where I'm waiting to get to my office. So the biggest challenge is right there. Now, the East Milton Fire Station, and Chief Madden already mentioned it, when they're trying to fight traffic that's in the morning heading to Boston, but even in the evening commute, that's a very busy overpass. Those people who have left the Milton Marketplace will probably agree with me as they make the cross across Granite Ave. So that is a real bottleneck there. Now, at the end of the day, on the evening commute, if you look down on Route 93 a little further south, north, you're going to see the Squantum Street exit for the expressway. Now, if you follow Squantum Street up to Adams Street, right, that's where all the politicians will hold their signs. Why? Because there is a steady stream of traffic coming from the expressway. Well, with the new location of the fire station, I never have a problem driving home, no matter what time of day, because I just turn right onto Squantum Street from my office, and it's clear all the way up, and there's a new intersection that's all been done over at Squantum and Granite, and I'm free into East Milton. So I really feel that, even though they've moved the fire station to the west side, because most of the calls are on the west side, I actually think this is more advantageous to the people living on the east side instead of dealing with the congestion. I know that Mrs. Powers put up the video of the traffic coming out at that prime time when school is let out. It's a little chaotic, I agree, but I've never had a big issue with it for any long period of time. If you go to the East Milton Fire Station, they are sometimes really locked in with traffic there. So I believe that we're going to have a much faster response time coming from the west side by turning right on Squantum versus if they had to come from East Milton to East Milton going down Granite Ave with the traffic that's there. So I'm very excited about it. I think it's a win-win situation. And I think they did a great job in locating this particular parcel. And I don't have a problem with them being neighbors to me while I'm working all day. I know I'm not sleeping at my office. And so the other thing I look at too is I was heartbroken when the East Milton Library closed because that was a beautiful building over there. And then, but then, you know, my thoughts changed when the Milton Arts Center came in and did such a great job. So I am so pleased that that is not on the docket tonight, because that has been a great asset to the members of the whole Milton community, not just East Milton. So I think this is a win-win for the community. And I know some of the neighbors are concerned. I get it. We usually do have a tendency to be concerned. You know, I look at East Milton, the neighbors were concerned about the development, the Falcone development, and he had a much smaller project lined up. And they fought and they fought. And now the project is a much bigger project than they were going to have. So I think sometimes, you know, try to look at the positive side, give it a chance. I think you're going to be very pleased with it all around. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We'll go to Ms. Jean Burns. Ma'am, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Jeannie Burns, Precinct 6 Town Meeting Member. As well as a Precinct 6 Town Meeting Member, I'm also a resident of Governor's Road for the last 10 years. I am very aware of traffic concerns and safety concerns on my street, cut through traffic and the like. I received the letters of concern from Precinct 6 Town Meeting members, and I attended a fire station building committee meeting that was mostly about design. Mr. Clark had reached out to myself and Mrs. Powers to be liaisons to get information out there to our precincts and to the neighbor. So I'm more aware than some of the process. I think the fire station building committee has done an amazing job and been very transparent. And if you want the information, it is out there. You just have to look for it. I think a lot of the concerns people have are being answered. The intersection at Adams and Squantum, the light that will be put in there and the reconfiguring of that intersection will make a major change in that area. Cars do fly down Adams Street. And I think with a signal there, that intersection will become exponentially safer. Also with speed, we will be looking at a fire truck that is pulling out of a driveway versus one that is already coming down Adams Street at the speed limit. As far as a traffic study has been done. I think as the new intersection is rebuilt, it's an opportunity to rework that area to make it better for everyone. And as far as the current station and what will happen to the current station, if it's going to be rebuilt or however that affects the square, that is going to be what it is no matter where the station gets built, because the new station will not be built in the current station's location. So I think the information is out there. I think I fully support this article, and I hope everyone else does too, because I think this has been a lot of work, and I think it is an opportunity to make that area safer through lights, through redirecting of the St. Agatha's driveway that exits onto Adams Street. And perhaps some of this needs to be put onto St. Agatha's, and they need to look at the way cars come and go through their parking lot and onto the streets. I know I see all of those cars with St. Agatha's stickers coming down Governor's Road. And I'm up in the Edge Hill Road to Quincy line area. So I fully support this article, and I hope everyone does too. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. I'll recognize Mr. Fundling.
Hello, Jay Fundling, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 3. I assume you
Yes,
can
sir.
hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I rise in support of this article. I'd like to address a couple of the previous speakers. Mr. Walker raised a comparison with developers. I'd like to point out this is not a development in that sense. This is not someone coming to our town and wanting to put in a business or apartment complex. This is a town need. It's very different than a developer asking us if they can build their business. And I would like to thank the resident from Walnut Street who spoke supporting the Central Fire Station. I would like to point out where the Central Fire Station is. The Central Fire Station is in a very similar neighborhood, a very similar location to what we're talking about tonight. It's a couple blocks from my house. It shares a parking lot with my church and one other church, and it shares a parking lot with a preschool where I sent my children. I never felt unsafe with me or my children being near a fire station. Thank you, and I encourage a yes vote.
Thank you, Mr. Fundling. We still have, by the way, Mr. White, Mr. Chinman, Mr. Hart, Ms. Martin, Mr. Mulligan, Mr. Johnson, and Ms. Simons left. Mr. White, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Bill White, Precinct 6 on Plymouth Ave in the East Milton neighborhood. I appreciated the conversation tonight. I did receive also the letter from Ms. Powers and raised those concerns at the last town meeting. And I was actually really quite impressed with Mr. Walsh and Mr. Clark's really thoughtful answers. I don't think we've seen a team in Milton this impressive since the days of Winchester and Chicago 20 years ago on the school building committee. I guess one final point, this is a necessary town service. There's no such thing as a perfect location, but this is a pretty darn good location. We cannot have looking for 100% unanimity on exactly having 100% of Milton residents support this location. However, as elected officials, we should be guided by the will of the people. And I will just remind folks that in Precinct 6, of the folks that voted on this question, 72% of people in that neighborhood voted to support this article. That's probably, I don't know if that's ever happened before in the history of Precinct 6 with 72% of support in any one issue. And final note is thank you to Chief Madden. We appreciated your passion, your sincerity, and your service to Milton. Thanks very much. And I urge a yes vote.
Thank you, sir. We'll go to Mr. Chinman. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. We town meeting members, we all have an equal
Mr. Chinman,
number of votes.
Could you state your precinct, please?
I'm sorry, Michael Chinman, Precinct 2.
Thank you.
We all have an equal number of votes. We each get one vote, but I think it's fair to say town meeting members are not all equal in the sway they carry when they stand. Some members unquestionably carry more oomph on the points they make. And I also think Mr. Walker is unquestionably one of those town meeting members. And I am sorry to say that I tonight disagree with almost everything, every point Mr. Walker made in his statements about this article. At night one of this town meeting, I heard many speakers say trust the process, including Mr. Walker when we were discussing the whether the school budget should be increased. I can't imagine a more thorough and vetted process than we have enjoyed from our fire station committee, especially from its two leaders, Brian Walsh and Dan Clark. Bill White just stole my thunder on this point, that's the gold standard as far as I can tell of who can lead a committee in a fair and transparent way. And they've spent years coming up with alternatives and proposals and study. And the experts are saying this location is an excellent location and the present fire station is an unbelievably poor location. And you don't need to be an expert to understand that when it takes a minute to go from the current fire station to the post office, it's a terrible location. And as for the concerns of the abutters, when we approved the article that caused the election vote we just had, there was speaker after speaker discussing how wonderful it is to live next door to the central fire station. At the time, I was impatient because I thought, what is the point of this? This article has support. And now I appreciate the point thoroughly. And I wish we had those speakers here tonight. We've had some of them, but I want everyone to remember there was many speakers were talking about that living next door to a fire station was a huge benefit, and it was not at all detriment or danger or anything like that. The last point I want to make is NIMBY is really a dirty word, and I think it's an especially dirty word when it's used to obstruct a civic use of property like this, a safety use of property. This seems clear to me when you examine everything that has been raised. It's been answered. As to the traffic study assertion, you don't need a traffic study if there's no impact on traffic, and there's not going to be customers going to the fire station like to a business or a commercial development, and there's only going to be a handful of runs a day. That's not a traffic impact that needs study. This is a good location. This is a good article. I urge everyone to vote yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chinman. Just a note for the body. I know Mr. Chinman was very complimentary about the member he referred to. I think longstanding members know we do try to refer to the members just with pronouns or in third person. It helps keep things civil and impersonal. So just a gentle reminder. And with that, we'll go to Mr. Hart, except for the moderator, of course. We'll call you by your name. Mr. Hart, you're recognized.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator. Chris Hart, Precinct 5. And I speak in strong support of this article. I echo everything that Mr. Chinman just said. And let me just say that I sat on the Warrant Committee for 3 years, and I listened to the Fire Station Building Committee and I believe its predecessor provide presentations, very thoughtful presentations throughout the process, saying what they've done, what they were doing at the time, where they were going. The Warrant Committee then vetted every single question to the point that they provided impressive answers, just as they've done tonight. Every single concern has been answered, and not off the cuff, with deep study and deep thought, questions that have been anticipated, questions that have been thought about. I have been impressed for years with this committee. I'm impressed tonight with this committee. I also echo Mr. Chinman's and other commenters' questions or points on trusting the process. If we're ever going to trust the process, it should be with this article. We've had a very expert fire station building committee. We've had the select board. We've had the warrant committee. We've had the fire chief, who have all supported this property for the reasons that we've already heard for a fire station. And so it's hard for me to think that there is any reason why we should not trust the recommendation that we've been provided. So I would strongly urge that we vote yes on this article. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, sir. We'll go to Ms. Martin. You're recognized, Emily Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Emily Martin, Precinct 7 Town Meeting Member. I will try to keep this brief. I also stand in strong support of this article. I have lived in East Milton for over 20 years. I am very, very familiar with the intersection at Squantum and Adams, and a street light there would be a very great improvement, and it would definitely help with the traffic flow of the station. To other members' points that they've made, you know, the current location is not any good. This is a much better centralized location, and most especially, this board has been taking a lot of time and putting a lot of thought into this article, into this proposal. I used to work for the select board, and I remember 4 or 5 years ago sitting down, and the detailed of plans that they had at the outset of this was phenomenal. And I feel like everything that they have done, you know, has been available, has been transparent. You know, they are addressing all of the issues, and it is a need in the town. Not everybody can be happy with this. And, you know, to Chair Collins's point earlier, it's an opportunity that if we don't take it now, it may be lost forever. And real estate in Milton is at a premium, and trying to find a lot of this size to accommodate this function is very difficult. So I strongly support this article.
Thank you, ma'am. We'll go to Mr. James Mulligan. Sir, you're recognized. If you could unmute.
Good evening.
There you go.
Jim Mulligan, Precinct 2. I want to support this article. I listened to what was said tonight. I have to say that this afternoon, I was at the Glover School to pick up my son. And so at the time, at about 3:25, there was one of the fire station, one of the fire department explorers came rolling down with its lights on, and then a truck came. And I think we all know what to do when there's a fire engine with the lights on rolling through an intersection. You know, I agree with my neighbor from Precinct 2, Mr. Chinman. I'm not sure there's a traffic study to be done when you're talking about a dozen cars a day. And, you know, I'd love to know what a traffic study would cost at that. I mean, I think that would be a frivolous waste of money for the taxpayers of the town. I think that the day that I call the fire department for services, I fully expect they'll come rolling up the street and deliver for me as much as they will for the neighbors over on Governor's Road. And, you know, I understand the people on Governor's Road aren't happy about, or on Adam Street or St. Agatha's Ave or whichever street they live on. But living on Elliott Street, they've added X number of units down at 131, and traffic is no better down here now than it was before. And I support the fire station. I think it's a great idea. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Moderator, would you like an answer to his question?
I'm not sure there was really a question, so in the interest of
It
time.
was.
Oh, it was a question?
It was.
Okay.
I'd love to know.
All right. Okay.
Vice Chair Dan Clark, Fire Station Building Committee. The cost, we did actually ask our architect to ask the civil engineer for a range for this in case the select board wanted us to do it. It was approximately $40,000 to $50,000.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to Mr. Larry Johnson, please.
Hi, this is Larry Johnson from Precinct 4. I was in Precinct 1 up until very recently. Support of this, I'll be brief. Most people have already made a lot of my points, but I just wanted to lend my voice in support of this article.
Mr. Johnson, you might back up a little bit from your microphone. We're getting a lot of static on the line.
Okay.
Maybe a little closer, I guess. We lost you.
Sorry about that. All right.
Let's do that. Yeah. Let's do that.
It's about because everybody has already made my point, so I'll be a little briefer now. So I just want to say that I've been there for about 10 years, and every single town meeting that I've been
Mr. Johnson, sorry.
I'm good. I think everybody's made my point, so.
Okay. Thank you for the time then. We'll go to Mr. Fahey.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Sean Fahey, Precinct 9. I will be brief. I speak in support of this article. And I have a few points I'd just like to make. I think the Fire Station Building Committee has done admirable work. And if our town has the type of effort for these substantial investments like we have for the fire stations, if the effort that the Fire Station Committee is the type of effort we do for all of our large expenditures, I think we should be very, very happy as a town and satisfied with that type of effort. I think they've been terrific. My second point, the opportunity to purchase this land has a limited window of time. And if that window of time closes with the Archdiocese, the next alternative location may not be as favorable as this one. My third point, I think we have an exceptional fire department in the town of Milton. And what we're doing now is probably long overdue. The current fire department deserves this, and the future fire department that we'll have in town deserves it also. And my last point, I sincerely understand the consideration due to the neighbors of the proposed location by all of the residents in town. And I think the reality is that our town is changing and development is impacting neighborhoods throughout our town. And some neighborhoods will be adversely impacted by such development, much more so than the neighbors of the proposed fire station location. There are neighbors that the density in some of these neighborhoods that are facing development will be so greatly impacted to a degree that is enormously beyond the impact to the neighbors of the fire station. And I think we all have to consider that that type of impact that's going on throughout our town. So I asked the town meeting members to support this article. I think it deserves a yes vote. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I need to take a moment for the town clerk to identify one of our call-in members.
Yes, if user number 3, I believe you're blocked. If you could identify yourself, you can unmute yourself by *6.
We can't hear you. If you could say again, we can't hear you. Call user 3. Could you unmute again and identify yourself?
Hi, this is Sean Fallon. I'm on a block line.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fallon.
Thank you.
Then we only have a couple more speakers. We'll go to Ms. Agostino.
Good evening, Diane DiTullio, Agostino, Precinct 9. There have been many, many points here. There's been a lot of information. The building committee has really been very open. Their website's been amazing. But there's one bit of information that all of a sudden it just hit me. So I did not intend to speak because I think all the good points have been made. But the town residents approved funding this project. That point means that we as town meeting members have already been told that they approve the project. So if this town meeting did not approve this article, while I completely understand the close neighbors' concerns and want them all addressed, but for this town meeting not to approve this article after the residents have approved funding these buildings would be difficult to explain to the town residents, especially since interest rates are at the lowest they've been in decades. Building materials are only going up in price. The cost to delay, which may very well require another question to the voters if the cost substantially went up, just doesn't seem to make sense in light of how the article's been presented to us, with the timing being after the town residents have voted for the funding of it. With that said, I trust that the residents in the letter, I was on the last fire station building committee meeting with some nearby residents, and I believe the chair of the select board mentioned that the resident closest to the building, I don't see anyone on that road, that Libby Road, on the letter. And their biggest concern was they're worried about those white pine trees falling on their home, which I said, as soon as this gets through town meeting, they should take that up with the town hall to make sure that once the town buys the land, they consider safeguarding their house from a tree falling on it. So with that said, and in light of what the voters want, I would move the question.
Well, ma'am, we have 2 speakers left. If you, and with Melinda Collins, if do you really want to move the question with 2 speakers left? It may take longer just to do that.
No, that's fine. I didn't know how many you had left. I can't tell.
Yes, looking, 2 speakers, and we're done.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Chair Collins, do you have a comment?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Melinda Collins, Select Board Chair and Town Meeting Member, Precinct 9. I appreciate the comments that were just made in support. I would like to clarify that the ballot question did not reference this purchase. So while people who were at town meeting and aware of town meeting and maybe had been reading about that, may have had that in mind when they were voting, I just want to make sure that people know that wasn't connected in the ballot question. And I'm just concerned about taking that as a mandate for this question, that this is totally in town meeting's hands at this moment. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, ma'am. We have Ms. Simons, Mr. Collins. Ms. Simons, you've spoken before. Is your hand still up because you wanted to speak again? If you could go off mute, or is this just an echo of before?
No, I'd like to speak again, Mr. Moderator.
Okay, if you could be brief, ma'am. Yes.
Okay. I really appreciate hearing all the points of view on this article, and I commend all on this thoughtful discussion. And having been in the position of Mrs. Powers with regard to buildings being imposed upon a residential neighborhood, I can relate. Our neighborhood has dealt with several large building projects put in by Curry College, and we have found our relationship with Curry improve with each project because the neighborhood was being included and consulted in the process. Is there anything that can be done to make the fire station location more palatable to the neighborhood in the proposed location?
Okay. I will ask Chairman Walsh, perhaps Mr. Clark.
Yes, Mr. Moderator, Brian Walsh, Chairman of the Fire Station Building Committee. It is an excellent question. We have begun the sessions with the neighbors, and we're going to continue those. So, for example, our original design by our architect was more of a commercial-looking building that would blend in with the rectory and the commercial building to the left. The neighbors made it clear they wanted something to look more residential with sloped roofs. Mr. Clark is pulling some slides up. And, you know, we intend to, we haven't even gotten to talking about what we'll do around the borders of the property. They may want certain fencing or tree lines or something in the back as delineators. So we will continue to work with them, much like we did when we knew we were building on the headquarters site. We worked a lot with those neighbors. We do have the time too. I want them to realize it's not going to be the first project that's built, and we will continue. I will commit to you that we will do our best to satisfy everything that we can for those closest neighbors. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Mr. Moderator, Dan Clark, Fire Station Building Committee Vice Chair. I just pulled this up because this was the to answer that question. You know, we received a lot of feedback, and we reached out to abutters to generate feedback, and then we started with, you know, as you can see, 6 different designs here. We're taking additional feedback after this meeting to incorporate and come back with additional new designs. And this is just the first step in this design process for just the building. As Chair Walsh said, you know, there's all of the ancillary components around it, and you know, all the site work to be still organized. I also wanted to just mention that the owner's project requirements is a guiding document for our architect, and there is so much information in that document for them to follow, and part of that is the impact on the neighbors. So, you know, daylighting standards, light standards for shining lights at night, you know, the stormwater runoff. It's a very, very comprehensive document. So I do just want people to be aware that that is something that was used on the other projects and would be incorporated into the East Milton project.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Okay, Ms. Simons.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. I see we did have Ms. Mary Kelly put her hand up. Ms. Kelly, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
You're very faint, ma'am.
Ooh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Barely.
Let's see.
Try to get Mr. Johnson's microphone. I think that would solve it.
Is this any better?
We'll go with that.
Okay. Mary Kelly, Precinct 9. I'm echoing the previous comments in terms of the tenor of this debate, the thoughtful questions about everyone with their concerns. I have 2 questions. One is, if we vote to approve this, is this borrowing under the levy limit or above the levy limit? And then my second question is, it was unclear on the slide that was just shown about the proximity of the fire station to the rectory, and whether there's still going to be a means of egress from St. Agus's out onto Adams Street. Could that be clarified, please?
Yes, ma'am. On the levy, I'll go to Ms. Collins. Could you answer a levy question for us? And they can.
Yes, our levy limit is 85 million. We're well below that. This is $890,000 that we would end up borrowing. So thank you. So the debt service on that would be quite small.
Thank you. And maybe Mr. Clark, since you had pictures, can you answer the question on proximity to rectory and egress?
Yes, I'll pull up the plot plan that shows it because it's a little easier. The rectory is shown here on the right, down here in the corner. So the subdivision is actually intended to leave both lots as conforming lots according to zoning. Additionally, the fire station is meeting all of the zoning requirements and setbacks that you can see here. And then this is the space for the road. It's going to be maintained as a two-way and a more formalized driveway entrance and exit with signage and curbs and everything. So I hope that answers your question.
So, Mr. Moderator, could I have a follow-up?
Yes, please, ma'am. Loud as you can.
So sorry, on the levy limit, what I meant was, is it under the, not the debt limit, but is this considered like a capital override vote that's above what our typical operational budget is? So will this be negatively impacting our operational budget? And then just to clarify the response from the assistant building committee member, we're now introducing a two-way entrance in proximity to where the current is a one-way exit. Is that correct?
Mr. Clark, let's do that. Yeah, why don't you do that?
Vice Chair Dan Clark, Fire Station Building Committee. No, it's currently a two-way and it's intended to be maintained that way.
And I'll go back to Ms. Collins for the debt question.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. This would not be a debt exclusion. It's a relatively small amount of money that would be borrowed again. So the debt service on it would be fairly minimal. You may want to ask the treasurer about that. We had a discussion and his recommendation was to do straight borrowing. Thank you.
All set, Ms. Kelly?
Yes, thank you.
Very good. Okay, we'll go to Mr. Webster Collins. You're recognized. You have to unmute. There you go, Mr. Collins.
Am I on now?
You are. Fire away.
Thank you. Webster Collins, Precinct 9, town meeting member, and also a member of the Fire Station Building Committee. I would like to summarize with 2 points. First, to answer one question by Ms. Powers that hasn't been in regard to the value of the existing East Milton Fire Station. And then secondly, to go over the big picture and summarize. In terms of the existing fire station, in August of 2018, I did an oral appraisal of that property following uniform standards similar to what Mr. Logue went through tonight with you, and concluded that the value then was $930,000 for just the land alone, assuming no residual or scrap value to the building. And that gives you an idea of the that this is what we're paying is less than what the asset we're substituting in its place is costing versus what the value of the existing fire station is worth. The second, the big picture is this. I complete professionally site searches and site surveys for real estate. In this particular case, it's the whole question of supply and demand. In this particular case, for the supply, we have one site. That one site is the St. Agatha's site. In terms of the demand for the site, we have 27,000 people who demand the use of that site. So I strongly urge that everyone, whether they are opposed to it or have any thoughts to the contrary, vote in favor of this very, very, very important article for the future of the town of Milton.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Does that conclude your remarks?
Yes, it does.
Very good. I only see one last hand, and that's we're down to the second speakers. Ms. Agostino, you're recognized.
Diane DiTullio, Agostino, Precinct 9. I just did want to reiterate, I believe the vote on the ballot question was greater than 80% in favor. And while we changed the language that we're, this article is to buy versus to lease, the town residents knew that this was the location. So once again, I can't stress enough that unfortunately, we have to put our trust in this committee that has worked for years, that they will work with the new fire chief, who's an amazing fire chief. I personally have experienced his expertise, and they will work with the neighbors on Governor's Road who are concerned. And I think we're all looking forward to the traffic being fixed from East Milton Square over to Adam Street. So with that, I move the question. Now, Mr. Moderator.
There are no more speakers, ma'am, so you have done so. So thank you. With that, no speakers here, we'll go to a vote. This requires a 2/3 vote. Admin, can we put up the poll? All those in favor of the motion before the body, please signify by voting yes. All opposed, please vote no. All abstaining, please vote abstain. If we could unmute the phones. On the phones, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no.
No.
Thank you. We can mute the phones. And if we could close the poll. I declare a 2/3 vote with 197 yes votes at 87%, 29 no votes at 13%, and 0 abstentions. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I know it is 10:20. There is one little bit of housekeeping article that the select board has asked we could attend to. If the members would indulge, I think we can get it done fairly quickly. I'll recognize Chair Collins.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator, for giving me the opportunity to take care of this. I move to reconsider Article 11 for purposes of an administrative correction. Mr. Moderator, would you like me to explain that correction now?
Why don't you, and we'll look for a second, and perhaps we can get this done.
Thank you very much. It appears that in the Article 11 Public Safety Budget in Inspectional Services, $18,650 was added to the salary line by mistake. However, the bottom line number is correct. This new recommendation amends the salary and general expense lines to deduct $18,650 from salary and then add the $18,650 to the general expenses. And you see, I believe, the new totals there, but again, the bottom line total is correct.
Very good. The motion has been seconded, Ms. Collins. Does anyone wish to speak to this motion to reconsider? It will require a 2/3 vote. I see just one hand. Ms. Riccardella. You're recognized, ma'am? Your hand's down. Okay, I see no other hands. We put up the poll. This is a 2/3 vote to reconsider Article 11, after which we'll go right to Article 11 and take care of it. All those in favor of the motion before the body, please signify by voting yes. All opposed, please vote no. All abstaining, please vote abstain. Can we open the phones? On the phones, all in favor of the motion, please signify by saying yes.
Yes. Yes.
Opposed, no. We can mute. We can close the poll. And results. The motion carries 97% to 3%. So we'll now reopen Article 11. Madam Select Board Chair, would you make a motion with what you want to do with Article 11?
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. I move that we remove $18,650 from the salary line and then add $18,650 to the general expenses line. And that would change the amounts from salaries and wages 559,102 to 540,452. And then general expenses would change from 652 to 19,302.
And the total remains the same.
The total does remain the same, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. I see a second from Lee Michael McLean. With that, does anyone wish to speak to this motion to, anyone wish to speak to the motion on the floor? Seeing no hands, we'll put up the poll, please. This requires a majority vote. All those in favor of the motion before the body, please signify by saying yes, voting yes, pardon me. All opposed, vote no. All abstaining, please vote abstain if we can unmute the phones. Pardon me, I made a mistake. Folks. I forgot to speak to the warrant committee. So let's pause. Administrator, if you could close the poll. Warrant committee's taking a vote, I assume. Warrant committee clerk, yes? No, we don't need the chair to speak.
The warrant committee, Mr. Moderator, George Asher, Chair, warrant committee, town meeting member, precinct 6. The warrant committee unanimously assents.
Thank you, and I apologize for skipping past you. Now we'll open up the poll. Pardon me? Repoll, yes, repoll, yes. Now, all those in favor of the motion before the body, please signify by voting yes. Opposed, no. Abstaining, please vote abstain. If we could unmute the phones. On the phones, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. We can mute. And put up the results, please. Close the poll and results. The motion carries. Majority vote 212 yes, 97%, 6 votes no, 3%, 1 abstain, 0%. Folks, the next one is going to be Article 26. I already know there are presentations. I would, unless anybody wants to go into the school budget right now, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Can we close the polling results? I see a motion to adjourn that has been seconded. If we can put up the poll. All those in favor of the motion before the body, which is to adjourn until Monday night, May 10 at 7:30 p.m., please signify by voting yes. All opposed, please vote no. All abstaining, please vote abstain. Open up unmute the phones. On the phones in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no.
No.
We can mute. And close the poll and put up results. The motion carries with 206 yeses at 94%, 12 noes at 6%, and 0 abstentions. Folks, we're adjourned until Monday night at 7:30. Thank you for your time.